Hey Ed,
Howdy.
quick fair warning, we're gonna be on TV tonight, and going forward, it starts recording automatically at 6:59.
6:59, who's time?
Whatever the internet goes off
GPS time?
of. Yeah,
6:58 right now, so
good.
6:59 right now. Okay.
You all set, Mary? All right. Let's call this meeting of the planning commission to order. Start out with a roll call. Commissioner Bushman.
Present.
Commissioner Fickow.
Here.
Trustee Reiner.
Here.
Planner Sinsky.
Here.
President Lysick here. Clerk Kellner.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Howdy-Shell.
Here.
And, Trustee Howdy-Shell.
Here.
And Commissioner
Both of them
Zimbrowski.
are
Present.
And Fire Marshal Brock.
Here.
Building Inspector Budiak and Engineer Rao. Item 2, consideration and approval of minutes from the October 22nd, 2020 regular meeting of the Planning Commission.
Make a motion to dispense with reading.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The minutes are labeled agenda rather than minutes. We'll start with that.
Yeah, so top.
I wonder if something changed there.
Trying something new.
Testing us. Just spot in page 3, top of page 3, under line item 4, the terms and conditions. Well, the original and recorded subdividers, that should be subdivision agreement. Catch that?
I don't know, should it be subdivided or subdivision?
Typically, it's a development agreement or subdivision agreement, right? So, I've never heard of a subdividers agreement.
Or what it's labeled?
It happens to be labeled that on the Hardesty one, for
Subdivider?
whatever reason, yeah.
Really? All right, scratch that.
Yeah, it's, I thought the same thing. It's actually called.
Probably not.
Probably, yeah. Agreed.
Second to last page, paragraph that starts off with trustee Howdy-Shell, down towards the bottom of it. The last sentence, he stated that he would never recommend, I believe that should be doing. Might want to add that on
Yep.
there.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3A, old business, village staff, official review and status update to the planning commission regarding the Cajun Phase 2 fill project. The property is located at approximately and surrounding South 72 West 23085 National Avenue, and it is Zone B3 General Business District. Naomi?
Sure. Cajun site, last we met, we had a site plan that's now in your packet for approval that the DNR has also looked at and essentially approved. I think the very next day of our, last planning commission, I told you the site was compliant. Very next day it rained about 2 inches and there was discharge from the site. It was muddy. We got a complaint from Kennel Club next door. We had already been out there by the time DNR called us to let us know. So Eric and I were on top of that, got some pictures, called the applicant, she came out, Robin came out and put some polymer in the pond, took care of some of the erosion that was occurring along the drive. It's quite a lot of rain for that site to handle. Response from the DNR was that we had appropriate response and they were pretty happy with our recommendations for fixing it. And we got pictures afterwards from the applicant that they had taken care of the issues on the site when we wrote a follow-up letter. So, it's, I haven't been out, we're going out once a month now. So I haven't been out there since that rainfall. But in your packet tonight is the site plan that we hope for approval. Move forward.
Are they, still by site plan, are they adding polymer to the pond before large scheduled events?
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
Did they, that time?
They didn't until I called her and then she came out. I called her right from the site, told her, you guys are discharging, you need to add polymer, record the amount added. Put it on your inspection report.
Do you have any reason why they didn't add it prior to it for site plan?
She did not explain.
I hate for it to become commonplace, we have to call each time for them to be gently reminded to add that.
Especially considering it was sparked by a neighbor's complaint, you know what I mean, so.
We'll circle back around to the site plan later in the agenda, along with the rest of the conditional use plan. Anybody else have any questions for Naomi?
Like I said, we're gonna, site plan at, under 4C,
Yes,
talk about it then.
right.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
All right, we'll move along then. I'm gonna skip 3B and C for right now to kind of get everybody out of here that wants to. We'll move along to 4A, new business. Review, discussion, and possible recommendation to the village board regarding proposed modifications to the subdividers development agreement for Harvest View subdivision in association with the recent conditional recommendation to approve another 2-year extension thereto. The current expiration date is set at December 31st, 2020. The applicant is Town Realty Incorporated in care of Jim Doring, Director of Development, Town Realty Incorporated. Being a member of ownership Corporate Park of Big Bend LLC, the property is located immediately west of and adjacent to the Badger Meadows subdivision off Guthrie Drive, is zoned R2 single-family residential district.
I'll give you just kind of the introduction, then I'll turn it over to Naomi, but the commission will recall having recommended approval of this 2-year extension, subject to first having the plans and specifications for that development reviewed under current code standards and specifications. and the development agreement and stormwater management documents modified to reflect a current review. And so the village board took that same action after our last planning commission meeting, that this document be reviewed and updated. Naomi had Tom Realty provide her with copies of all of the approved subdivision plans and documents, and she's had a chance to review them. Her memorandum goes into great detail, but basically from where she'll take off, what I guess I want to add for the commission is that what has to happen now, apparently based on this memorandum, is that the documents themselves need to be modified by Town Realty, and the development agreement and stormwater management agreements redrafted to reflect current standards. And so how will all of that happen timely for them to get a village board approval before the end of December? And it won't. And so my suggestion to the commission tonight, after kind of thinking this through time-wise, is that a 3-month, a 1-month, a 3-month, a 4-month extension be granted, whatever time frame you feel like you need to get those documents redrafted by the developer, and then the development agreement and stormwater management agreements written, and get them back in front of this commission. I don't know if that could all happen by January's meeting.
I think that's more in their court. I mean, I've pretty much given them what they need to follow.
So Tom really got a copy of your, have you heard back from them since
No,
you issued this?
no.
I guess it's just dated
It's only been a couple
Monday,
days.
so.
Right, they were waiting
Yeah.
for a report from the planning commission as well, which, rather than send one before tonight's meeting, it was better to send it tomorrow morning.
So a quick, I guess, summary. When I looked at I kind of divided my letter based on first some of this, like the subdividers agreement, kind of compared it to what we look for now in our current development agreement, and making some recommendations, like we don't specify in the current subdividers agreement 120% of the cost. We just say the cost to install public improvements. This particular development has a financial guarantee letter of credit spelled out at $786,400. I don't know if, that was, I don't know how long ago. So I don't know if that's accurate for 120% of the cost. Right. So we would want to get that updated and adjusted. There's no mention of any required asphalt drawings in the document, which we would want to be sure that we have in there. The agreement currently doesn't specify that the village engineer can perform inspections on the stormwater management facilities, which, as you know, is something we would want to have in the document as well. I'm kind of on 1D now, if you're following along, but the village, it talks about dedication of roadways after the first lift. We usually don't take over the roadways till they're completed, so that would be an update. And time to completion of improvements, we now like to see 75% of the homes substantially completed before the final lift is put on. So those are just some items out of the subdividers agreement I think should be updated. The plat document, which was in one of the files in your packet as well, only shows monoseptic locations on 5 of the lots instead of all of the lots, which is now a requirement of the final plat. And then there's a couple of swales that I think should be contained in drainage easements that are not currently shown on the plat for stormwater conveyance. Then I reviewed the covenants, conditions, easements, and restrictions, which I had a couple of comments about related to just, it kind of conflicted with the plat because one of the statements was that each lot had been tested for an individual on-site mound septic system, but that's inconsistent with what the plat shows. There's lots that have no location of that, and then there was a kind of a weird statement, I thought, specifying some lots may require specific resident design because of lot grading, but I think we would all want all of these lots to have lot grading plans and submitted for the engineer and building inspector to review. Stormwater maintenance agreement, there's a few updates there, but the main concern I have is with the stormwater management system, the facilities, the stormwater facilities. The modeling that they use was outdated. We now have an Atlas 14 rainfall that is required per ordinance, and that's a little bit higher. It's about 1/10 of a foot higher in rainfall than the model that they were using. It's a different, right now, your current ordinance has a different rainfall distribution, so how the rainfall is spread out over time. So that should be updated. There are specifications as far as curve numbers that can be used for existing conditions, which is how you set the amount of detention volume required. They're using too high of a curve number for the current ordinance. Things like this will all affect the pond design, in the amount of area that is required for the pond. I did note that the pond does include that section of Badger Meadows that we were hoping to be detained in their detention facility. That's in their detention calculations already. So not knowing the history of this development, it would seem that that maybe had been the plan all along, with that being draining towards their pond. Perhaps that was planned for. That wasn't specifically said in any of the documents that I looked at. But it seems to make sense since Badger Meadows doesn't have its own pond for that drainage area, and this one incorporated it. A couple comments about the site plan and erosion control that could be updated, and then updating some of the paving specifications.
Can I ask a simple question on this?
Sure.
So, I've only been on planning now, a couple of years. These guys have seen us, been here probably since the inception of this. What we do know over the last few years that town has indicated that it's unlikely they would build on it anytime soon, based on market conditions and depending on what would potentially happen with a big development. So with that being said, I question, is it worth all the effort to get it updated, to spend the time and money, and on our end too, the amount of effort it's gonna take to review it and talk about it? Or is there the ability to basically put in the extension with a condition saying, listen, if this is a reality, if you really are gonna pursue this plat, then all these things have to occur before you can get started.
I think that'd be more like a question for Mary.
I think what you should probably do, as I'm thinking about this and I'm listening to Naomi and now your remark, why not just let the developer's agreement lapse?
Yeah.
Why extend it?
Mm-hmm.
The plat's recorded, they're entitled to build that plat.
And then if they were to pursue it, they have to draft a new development agreement?
They now know what their old plans are going to have to do differently, and that a new developer's agreement and a new stormwater management agreement will need to be struck. Just let it go away.
Can you do that with the plats being developed the way they are?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because they had talked about it over time, if sewer was available, that would possibly change their plat, and they would plat it based on, that occurred as well, so.
Yeah, and that's what I'm mentioning, is that, they've kicked this can down the road now numerous times. We've extended this thing, and now it's got more scrutiny on it, which is great, because we have to hold a certain standard, but I just question the value of our time at this point, knowing what's happened so far in 13 years, and what their potential future is with that plat. Who knows? I mean, they could change their mind, and if the development doesn't happen over there by the interchange, they could say, hey, we'll still do this residential, but I feel even that would be such a ways out for them, based on their projections as far as the footprint and what the market would say would do well there. And at least that was the last conversation with Jim. He indicated that. So that's the reason I kind of question, is it really worth this effort to bring this thing up to snuff for probably an unlikely scenario?
What's the downside if you let it lapse?
versus extending it with a
Right,
condition like I
right.
suggested.
There is no downside, because those are already dedicated right-of-ways, so he doesn't have the privilege to go in there and build anything until he reaches a development agreement with the village.
Was it a final plat that was recorded or
It
just
is,
a preliminary?
yeah, each one of those lots has its own tax key number.
I didn't realize it was a final plat. I don't remember, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's a, you know, if it's a wash, so to speak, whether you approve the 2-year extension with a condition saying you can't really do anything without review and modification meeting the requirements, or you let it lapse indicating you gotta start from scratch and draft the whole thing over, I guess.
I think what this exercise does is definitely shows, for the first time since we've been granting all these extensions, that there is substantial disparity between the proposed construction drawings
Original intent.
and the required construction drawings under today's standards. And so,
Which is, I mean, that's the nature of the beast when you're talking about 13 years later, you know,
Yeah,
there's
that's
gonna be a lot
sometime-
changing at that point.
yeah, you're better served to let it lapse or update it, because otherwise, you know, we talked about this at staff level. There's really nothing that prevents them from selling that out on January 2nd to some other developer who would gladly go in and build under those old
Original intent.
approved documents. And-
Right, that's what I
yeah.
say, what's the downside for them? The downside for them is we let it lapse, I
Right.
guess.
Mhm.
They would just as soon have us extend it, you know, there's no
Right.
It's the easiest.
Right. Yeah, I feel like the village really can't extend it at
Right,
this point, because
right.
there's so many things that even at the state level, we can't really allow.
And it could all change again by the time it,
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's another 13 years, for sure, yeah.
Right.
So there would almost be a option A and option B presented back to town, stating either you can update this and we'll record it through, or just let it lapse.
But it's gonna have to happen by December 31st.
Yeah, I think it's so unlikely that they could even make the hoop jumping. You're talking about holiday season,
Well-
it's 5 weeks away.
Right, so,
What would the amount of effort that would have to occur?
so we would have to.
or we just table the extension and it lapses.
Yeah, so we wouldn't have to vote on it either way or give
Right.
an extension on it now, we still have December. Or we could either say we're going to let it lapse, and then if we have to take that to the board, we can take that to the board, I'm not sure if we'd have to. If they want the extension so that they can go ahead and update this, then we could ask at the same time on how much that they would like to ask for, and then we could discuss that, and we could vote on it at the next planning session, and then ratify it at the board meeting directly after that in December, right? Or no.
That'd be January.
Yeah,
So
January.
ultimately what would have to
So sorry.
happen is
Yeah.
if they chose, which I think is unlikely at this point,
Yeah,
if they chose to pursue updating it, we could potentially recommend a temporary extension, right, at the December meeting, but then we'd have to hold a board meeting likely,
I
At the end of the
yeah,
year,
I wasn't thinking about the
you know,
timing on
because
that.
of the overlap.
Yeah.
I think, I think it's highly unlikely they're gonna wanna jump through all these hoops, based on what I know.
Yeah, I think they've been a good corporate partner for the village, and they've had a lot of input and in developing plans within the village, and developing, development plans and so on. And they've been involved, you know, for a long time. I think we might be the better thing to give them the options, I guess.
Yeah.
If
The more I
Don't
think about
make a
the
decision
temporary
at this point, but give them the options, that these are the options, how do you wanna, what would you like to do?
Yeah, but in order to do that, we'd almost have to approve a temporary extension.
Well,
That would go before
we've
the
got
board.
December meeting to approve that extension.
Or
For
just-
planning, but not for the board.
Yeah, it wouldn't be able to.
You wouldn't be able to see the board unless we had
Yeah.
the
That's the
emergency
same
board
thing I was
meeting
thinking.
December
Yeah.
31st.
Yeah, okay.
So let's just let it lapse, and if they wanna come back with a new plan, then we basically take that as,
And time is
as
the
we
of
normally
the
would.
essence there. so
That's
we-
really
We
the
could do that.
safest route for the village.
We could do that, we could say, at this point, we're gonna let it lapse, unless you would like to ask for an extension, to jump through the hoops, to do the updating, then we can talk through that on how we make that work by the deadline.
Yeah, if we don't need the plan, then I don't see any harm in just letting it lapse.
Can we
Would
recommend?
the plat have to be modified as well?
I recommended a couple changes to the plat with drainage
Right.
easements. And then if the pond got any bigger, the outlots would have to be changed, the size of the outlots. based on the modeling, the stormwater modeling, that would change the plat. And the plat should also be updated to include all the mound septics on every lot. So, yeah,
And that can be done by an amendment, yeah.
I can reach out to Jim tomorrow, let him know what we discussed. Do we want to recommend the board have an option to extend a 3-month extension if he wants to proceed with amending his developer's agreement and his stormwater agreement and his plat? If he's willing to stick all this money into it, we'll give him 3 months to get it done. If he doesn't, we're gonna let it lapse.
We could do that, so.
Yeah, and you talk to them between now and the board meeting and
Yeah, 'cause
So it's a
we got-
conditional
So it's a
extension.
condition,
Right,
yeah, it's
right.
a,
conditional extension
making-
and
yeah.
the board will make the final, you know, can either deny
because
it.
that gives them basically the 2 weeks to decide that internally.
Yeah,
You know, until the December meeting of board meeting.
right.
I think that's the fairest thing to do with,
No, I think you're right. It kind of is the middle ground for both scenarios, right?
Yeah.
So if we
Yeah.
make the motion today to let it lapse, with the condition that that's their intent, they have the ability to exercise or pursue a 3-month extension if they feel fit, if they feel they're willing to, right? Something similar to that.
Yeah.
so how do you word that?
Right.
We're essentially letting it lapse unless,
I'm sure John Schober can synopsize that in a
Yeah.
paragraph or less.
yeah, I mean, so it's basically a motion to let it lapse unless they notify us before the next board meeting that they have intent to do the modifications, and then we would be comfortable, the planning commission would be comfortable with the board then acting on a 3-month extension.
So the only thing I could,
Conditional
the only thing I
Conditional.
could say that we leave ourselves open for is if town would decide that they wanted to sell the property in that 90-day window. Now hypothetically, because we've said that this plan,
Is extended for 90 days.
yeah,
Well, then we put that in the condition,
yeah,
that the 90-day extension, does not allow sale under that agreement.
it's the only thing I
it's
think.
for the ownership under town realty only. or
Yeah, it's
whatever.
only an extension for them, not for any other body. That'd be pretty easy, just to write that little verbiage in. Okay, so that's my motion.
You got that?
repeat it.
No.
I will have it.
We got a
Is that-
recording, so we'll
Mary, is
figure
that
out.
kosher?
She can
Yeah,
decipher all
I
that.
think that
All
is.
right.
I think it's
I think
fair.
that's-
I think it's fair from all sides.
Well, I agree with it being fair, it's the matter of whether it's gonna pass the muster on that.
I second that motion.
You're not gonna repeat it? Any further,
I understood it.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So then you'll reach out to Jim on that?
I will probably call you first to rehash your motion.
Because otherwise I could,
Once
Okay.
Kelly gets it all
otherwise I could.
deciphered, and then
Yeah.
we can review it at that point, make sure it sounds right.
All right, we will move along to item 4B, review, discussion, and possible recommendation as to enforcement steps / measures attendant to developer. For example, D&M Development Group Incorporated, non-compliance with the approved development agreement and stormwater management agreement for Douglas Court.
Right, so this is another one where Naomi's really the point person on it. Douglas Court still isn't built to specifications as far as the road, the stormwater, and anything go.
Yeah, okay, so at the last plan commission, when I gave an update of Douglas Court, there was discussion of starting enforcement actions. So, I wrote a notice of violation that went out on dated October 27th, that was hand-delivered to D&M Development Group, Mike Kahn. The letter's in your packet. It specifies the village ordinances in which he is in violation, or the site is in violation, I should say, and gives a couple deadlines. The first deadline was Tuesday, November 3rd, and citing fines resulting in $1,000 per day retroactive from the date of the plan commission meeting on October 22nd will be assessed if the following items are not addressed, and then fines will accrue each day thereafter. These items 1, 2, and 3 we have not yet received. was a written timeline for completion of the work that's outstanding. I asked for this timeline, I've been asking for this timeline since I pretty much started with the village, just to get an acknowledgement of the concerns and when they're gonna be addressed. Still have not received such timeline. Number 2 was an engineer's cost estimate for the construction work that had yet to be completed. This estimate must include all improvements within the right-of-way, which was not, that was left undone, and then the installation of the required stormwater detention facility, as well as erosion control and final site restoration. I included this as an item because at the time we were discussing with the attorney, do we actually even have a financial security? And this would help us determine, if any, what letter of credit we needed and how much. So that was the reason for that item. And then number 3, the name and contract documents of all professionals that will be contracted to complete the site plan, including engineering, pond grading, pavement repair, and restoration for the site. We weren't sure who or what contractor, what consultant was going to be finishing up the work out there. And this would give us another contact since we were not getting a lot of feedback from Mr. Khan. So those 3 things remain outstanding. I had also put in a deadline of Tuesday, November 10th for fines resulting in $1,000 per day retroactive from the date of October 22nd. Fines will be assessed and accrue each day thereafter. The items are found to be not complete or found non-compliant. Number 4 was completion of grading and restoration of the ditches within the Douglas Court right-of-way. We have seen that work done out there, and I included a construction inspection report from the days of November 5th, 6th, and 7th. Construction started on November 5th. We happened, Mike Torres from our office drives by through here on his way to work. He happened to step out there and they were starting grading. So we had asked to be notified. We were not, but he was there when the first truck was dumped. So we were able to talk with the contractor initially, with No Limits Excavating. And then we had our inspector out there a couple hours after that to get them started. We were out there during grading on the 5th. The 6th, they finished up grading, started restoration, and finished up on the 7th. So that's kind of, there's a summary of the construction inspection that performed out there. So that item, if you go out there, you'll notice not the entire ditch work has been finished. There's a section by the pond, which we have yet to finalize a plan for the pond, a grading plan for the pond. So that is not complete. And anything near the wetland, because of the time of year, we were nervous that the grading wouldn't stabilize and we'd have this further issues in that wetland and pond area. So they were directed to stay off that side of the road. The rest of it is all been graded and matted and seeded, and to the best of our ability, or their ability. So number 4, I would say, is compliant right now as per our request. And then number 5, submission of the required pond modification grading plans. As soon as I sent out the update memo, I received a revised set of plans from Cardinal Engineering. So I have, Monday afternoon, I received an updated plan set for pond improvements. So we did receive that on Monday. So I guess at this point, there are some items that we stated in our violation letter that haven't been addressed. Technically, I think fines could be assessed for those. I know Warren has talked with Mr. Khan, so we are getting some response now. I don't know if you want to share that, Warren.
Sure. I went out on Sunday with the developer, took a ride around there, looked at everything, talked to him, and explained to him what this letter of violation meant. He was a little confused and kind of honestly freaked out that the village was gonna fine him $1,000 didn't know what to do with that letter exactly. And I told him, I said, well, I think it would be in your best interest to send a copy of that letter to your engineer and have him fix all this stuff. I said, number one, first and foremost, it's about communicating. Your engineer has to communicate with our village engineer, every detail as to what's going on. I said, our village engineer can't contact yours and ask him questions like that because we're not paying him. You're paying your engineer, have him do his job. So evidently you've gotten some responses out of them now,
Yeah.
starting Monday, and I hope that the communication gets better from Cardinal. I'll keep on Mike to keep feeding, or have them feed you with information, but he needs to be reminded that he's gotta get the contact information. I don't know that the dollar amount is as important.
I would agree, yeah.
Uncover the letter.
But we have found out from our attorney that there is a financial surety, I think they called it, that will protect the village. So we don't need a traditional letter of credit, is what we've been told from the attorney. And that the developer's agreement, while not signed, is legal because it was approved by the board. So that was good news this week. So I agree with I agree with your cost estimates.
Okay.
So is the cost estimate, well, besides the cost estimate, what other open items are there?
They need to get Naomi the list of people working on it, which is probably too late now, because I assume they're done working for the season.
Yeah.
Because that one part of the ditch, we're asking them not to touch because of the pond modification as well as the time of year, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that one area,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
I would still like a written timeline. I don't think he understands, I don't think he has a good idea of, I just want some feedback from him as far as,
Confirmation of the
yeah,
amount of effort.
what are you gonna do
What's
and
the
how are
amount
we
of
gonna get
effort,
there,
how
yeah.
long is it gonna take, yeah?
Right, I don't think, that's not, I haven't gotten the feeling from him that he's understanding that.
Yeah, I think part of that's just project management and that's
Right,
where it's
and we
lacking.
can then,
Right.
we can then work with him to keep to that timeline, and essentially he has told us that's when it will be done. I don't know that we need to fine for that necessarily, but I think that's a pretty easy thing to do. And then I just wonder, every time, if we get a plan, I already know there's information on this site plan that I asked for that's not been included. I don't wanna ask for it and then wait another month, and then ask for,
That's why I guess my hope is that Warren's conversation with him on Sunday hopefully set that straight. That
Yes.
listen, this void in communication can't continue to occur, otherwise
Right.
we're gonna be forced.
Right. Yeah, once you go through that, let me know what you're missing, and I'll get in contact with Mike and make sure he knows to give them, to get you what you need for information.
I'm gonna call them directly too, cause
Okay.
I'm not sure why it's not on there. It was very clear what I wanted.
Right,
But yeah, I will, and then I will follow up with you.
okay. So all you really need from Mike personally is a timeline. I will work on that with him. I'm sure that will come from Cardinal, and I'm sure it's gonna start the spring, but
Yeah.
they need a timeline at least to get you documentation and paperwork now.
Well, that, and as she's mentioned, and then that gives us something to hold him accountable to, right?
Right.
If he says the amount of effort is 30 days of work and your projected start on X, the clock starts ticking, as opposed to, yeah, we don't know when we're gonna start or how long
Right.
it's gonna take.
Right,
Right, and the last time it was, we're gonna start Monday, and it was Thursday. So we met them out there Friday, we had a site meeting, nothing happened for 3 weeks.
And no notification whenever they did start, right?
No notification
So
when they did
how
start.
long have you been asking for, the submission of the, required pond modifications?
I wrote a review letter mid-October.
Okay.
We got one plan set. I don't know, that was like a month or two to get the first plan set of modifications. I could get back to you specific dates. I got that, I maybe took a week to review it, gave them comments back. And then it was a month from those comments to this new plan set.
So, you received the record, plan modification plans on Monday, right, you said?
Monday record, this went out in the mail, yeah.
Okay, so, does it address like the big, 10,000 foot items such as, where they're going to actually install it and whether or not they need to work with the DNR to take some of the marsh designated areas?
I haven't done a full review, but two of the things that I noticed right away is that they do not talk about anything about the 2-year event, which we said they had to detain it in the wetland, the 10 and 100 in the wetland. They sized the pond for the 1 and 2 year on the property. But they didn't provide me with spot elevations. There's a house, right next to it that has a partial walkout. I specifically asked for that elevation months and months ago with the initial site meeting, with Mr. Cardinal. And that is still not on there. There's a well located near the pond that I want shown on the plans. And there's a septic system on that lot. And none of that is shown, yet.
And
I
that
haven't-
was all asked for though?
Oh,
right?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
In writing in the review
Months ago.
letter, and then in previous emails.
Alright. With that being said, I mean, the plan that you received, is it signed off on by PE?
Should be stamped by a PE. Didn't look at it directly. I mean, usually they are. I don't approve them unless they are. I'll send it back and ask for a stamp.
I'm just curious what
Yeah.
type of a plan they actually did send you.
Yep, it should be signed off by a PE.
Seems like it's not to the standards or qualifications that you asked for, and I would hesitate to say that that was a complete plan that you received. The reason I say that is that this is going on a little bit longer than just, hey, he's almost in compliance. And it goes back to the cautionary stance that I've taken on other things, such as Cation, as we keep threatening to levy fines and notice of violations, but so far in the year that I've sat on this commission, we've yet to do that. So it doesn't set a good precedence with us moving forward with future developments. It shows that we kind of roll over a little bit. So I'm just saying that it's been going on for a lot longer than just mid-October, trying to get this information and try to get it settled. I'm wondering, since we filed the notice of intent for notice of violation, did we file that with the DNR as well? Are they aware that we've filed those letters?
No.
Okay, so it's just between us and the developer.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we would be just in citing fines for the construction work and the plans that we asked for. They were late. They did not meet the deadline. We could do that. We could cite fines retroactive as the letter says. I think we would be just. I think we spelled that out. I think, that's why we write the letter that way, so that we can actually enforce it. But that would be a decision, for the plan commission.
I'm just hesitant, because if they've given this plan at this point, comes back and we have to wait another couple, 3 months for the next revision to come through, and then another couple of months to try to get things solidified, we're talking midsummer, late 21 before we see a conclusion on this. I'm just throwing that out there as my thoughts, and that's saying that I invoke the fact that we need to fine. It's just, we need to set the line in the sand and not move it.
And I guess a discussion with the engineer might be a good thing as far as the things that they didn't include, and why didn't they include them. I mean, a lot of times the engineer will talk to the developer and say, this is what they want, and the developer's like, well, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this, and so then the engineer leaves it out just to see what happens, and, because that's how things happen that way.
If you talk to Cardinal Engineering, you wanna just remind them that they're gonna cost Mike a lot of money if they don't do what you're asking.
Yep.
And I will remind Mike that if he doesn't have them do what you're asking, it's gonna cost him a lot of money.
When- No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, but, whenever I was out there today, I noticed there was 2 trees that were cut down.
Yeah.
Between the northernmost home side on the eastern side and the wetland area, they toppled the trees over into the marsh
Into
and
the
were cut
wetland,
off at about
yes.
the 3-foot level.
I just noticed that today too. I don't
So-
think I could see it when the foliage was.
So usually whenever they're cut off at the 3-foot level, that's indicative that they're going to come back through with excavators or dozers and remove those stumps. Do you know of any?
They did start clearing at one point, I think, out there, and they were stopped, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
they were gonna start putting the retention pond in where it was originally supposed to go, and it would have encroached on the lot there, on the Blazek's lot. And I had them stop because, you know, you don't want a retention pond literally coming onto your land.
It's
Even
the one
though,
with the walkout exposure.
right,
Yeah, so,
so I asked them to stop constructing that until we could review all the plans and come up with something that worked for
was
everybody.
this recent?
Yeah, that was a summer.
Right before I
So
came
those
on
trees are
board.
probably from that, like you said, you probably just
Right.
couldn't see it because of the foliage.
Yeah, the Blazeks called me and said they're cutting trees down and they're getting ready to, you know, cut into our lot, and I'm like, called, you know, real quick, and I'm like, whoa, whoa,
Yeah, I didn't remember seeing the trees
whoa.
down.
Yeah, it's been down since, I could look back in my records as to when I talked to them, but
Okay.
it's been since
I
summer.
think that's when it was, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that was a newer activity.
But yeah, we were looking for a better solution on that pond and to have it, you know,
In that spot.
immediately on their lot line and
So this was back in the summertime, if they were going to put in the pond way that was originally specified, so at that point, I'm assuming that we would have been asking for plans on the new design, right? All the way back midsummer, whenever that was?
I would, yeah,
I
mean,
think
We're setting history here, guys.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, unfortunately, the kicker is the Cajun properties set the tone. They were given a whole lot of, warnings with, you know, all bark, no bite. So I'd hate to use Mike as the whipping boy when we let somebody else, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just, you know, providing facts.
yeah.
So I agree with you, I mean, if we're gonna threaten fines or citations, we need to own that. I don't know that we need to make this development the one that we choose to start that on. I think we make that decision to go forward with, hey, when we send these letters, we mean business. I just would hate to, you know, if Mike's only been, so to speak, non-conforming for a few months, he could easily say, hey, listen, how could you guys let Cajun get away with for how long? Why am I targeted? And I just don't want, nobody should be in that position, not us or him, and that's what I worry.
Yeah.
And again, it's, you know, no matter who it is, it's whether it's Mike or anybody, I would have that same comment.
Yeah.
that is just kind of messed up from the get-go, you know, with that lot being sold and that pond being where it was.
Yeah, I mean, there.
Right, with the-
You know, that pond should have been in before that lot was sold.
Well, and this goes all the way back to the decision to start the development without this, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
This thing goes back a ways, so that's why I hate for this to be that, all of a sudden, we
Right.
crack whip on. And, but I agree with you, I mean, ultimately, if we're gonna send these letters out, they have to have an impact and should, and the only way to make that
Otherwise, we
impact
shouldn't
is.
even put them on record.
Agreed.
We shouldn't even
Agreed.
have them on record, because all it does is set the precedence moving forward.
Yep, nope,
So if there was supposed to be a pond there prior to, you know, according to the lot designer, and there was supposed to be a pond there before they could build on it, is that what you're saying?
yeah, ultimately, the stormwater management and all that should have been done before the first lot was allowed to build their house.
And who would have approved that prior to?
Yes, there appears to be a story here, and the reality is it was given a green light without structure. So somebody was,
But who gave it the green light? Did this planning commission do
No,
it? Or was it the previous
Previous.
administration?
yep,
Okay.
so that's why we can't change history, but that shows you that it goes back a ways as far as dropped balls or missed opportunities to get this right sized. So,
So I will talk to Mike, you will talk to Cardinal, and we will talk to each other next week sometime and figure out what they said and where we go.
Yep.
Sound fair? All right,
So that's a no action needed then tonight,
well, yeah, outside of phone. calls.
outside of conversation,
Right,
that's not really an action. At least not to vote on.
right. We'll move along to item 4C. Review, discussion, possible recommendation to the village board for a conditional use grant amendment approval to modify Exhibit B, the site improvement plans attendant to the Cajun Phase 2 fill project. The property is located at approximately and surrounding South 72 West 23085 National Avenue. It is zoned B3 General Business District. The property owner is John Cajun, Marilyn S. Cajun, Revocable Living Trust.
John Cajun got to a point where he had built his stormwater management practices and built the hill differently than the original set of approved plans. So he has finally doubled back now and gotten the actual plan set that reflects what's out there, drawn up, and Naomi's had a chance to review it, has comments about it, but process-wise, we're talking about amending the conditional use grant. Public hearing isn't required because it's considered a minor amendment. We're not changing the characteristic of the use in its broadest sense. So it's a conditional use grant amendment. We'll make a recommendation to the village board for their final action. And it's really just to replace the construction plan set from the original CU with this new plan set. So I'll let Naomi kind of introduce her review.
Yeah, I actually don't have this one with me. There's a few conditions on the engineer's approval. There's the pond that's out there now, it will need a stabilized spillway. We do not want them to do that until spring. We do not want them to do that until we are notified. We have a pre-construction meeting and possible construction management out there. It's one of the big conditions, it's one of the big conditions, I talked with Will and Eric about the site. What do we want to see, since they started out there. Right now, they're only allowed to maintain and install erosion control measures. We want required documentation of the contractor that will be finishing the project, finishing the grading work. Even Robin says she does not want Stop to do it because he goes rogue on her. So,
What does that mean?
There's some brutal honesty right there.
Yeah, not surprised.
Anyway, just kind of trying to keep it under control, that site. We asked for a pre-construction meeting, prior to construction. The applicant shall continue to coordinate with Wisconsin DNR for their notice of intent and provide self-inspection paperwork. And then upon stabilization, we want an as-built of the stormwater pond to ensure that, we don't know what spring's gonna look like, but we wanna make sure the volume is still there come spring. Finalization of these states. The as-built survey has to show the spot elevations to verify the depth of the pond, the volume of the pond, as well as the spillway and berm, top of berm elevations, and we'll compare that then with the modeling and the site plan to make sure it still has enough volume after all is said and done. The site plan that you have in front of you was submitted to the DNR. They looked at it, they generally approved of it as a post-construction pond. They too will be back out there in the spring looking for full site stabilization. And maybe earlier, whenever they decide to go out there.
So all of those conditions, any recommendation that you make to the village board should probably carry Naomi's conditions with it as part of the amendment.
Did you have that letter in here?
Yeah, it was in with,
The first part, I put it in with
Three or-
3A.
3A, yeah,
October 19th.
correct.
Same letter, it was in your packet last month, but I didn't have a complete set of plans with it, so It's the same letter as that.
Did they verify the final elevations of the top plateau fill, of the fill in that?
Yep, that shows on the plan.
That's all on there?
And the pond was shot, when they did the plans in spring/summer, but we would want as-built to show it's still that way. Come final stabilization.
You know, the elevations on the top of the plateau, like in phase one, are those what they originally had approved, or are they just as-built now? Or how close is it to what was originally
Oh,
approved?
phase one, I
Yeah.
don't know. I can't answer that question about phase one, I'm sorry. We'll review these as well, the plans and the modeling. I would think that phase one,
I remember at one time, the phase one was quite a bit higher than the original, site plan that we approved. But, you know, John was like, let's gonna settle this much over this much time, and
oh,
therefore it should be there, you know, at some point.
I can't comment.
And I'm just curious if it was.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
I was finding out the plan, if that was verified in here as well or not.
Not on that set, I don't think.
No, 'cause we're just focusing on phase two, right?
As a condition, I remember that conversation, as a condition of the phase two CUG being initiated, they had to demonstrate full compliance with all of the phase one requirements. And the overall elevation of phase one was high, but it was consistently high.
Right.
And so I guess everybody resolved to accept that John said it was going to,
So, well, it probably would, I mean, it
Work
would.
out in the end.
I mean,
right.
I just was curious if there was any, you know, as-built elevations taken that would kind of give us an idea of where that's at.
Not that I know of. How much higher was it? Mary, do you recall?
Few
Like
feet.
6 feet, I think, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know, at some point.
Yeah, right.
I didn't recall it was that high, but
Yeah.
I knew it was at least a few feet. Yeah.
I don't know that we ever really knew for sure how much higher it was, but I remember Will making that comment at one time.
So there must be an as-built, because somehow we knew
Where it's
what
at.
that finished elevation was. Yeah.
Mhm.
I can't see the elevations on that original plan.
I couldn't either.
You can't read
Maybe the
it.
PDF, it shows up better.
Yeah,
Looks like a 970 maybe.
it's tough to see there. The new plan is easier to see, the old one is impossible. It's like, yeah, I think that as-built or that elevations came when they were, after phase two was ready to start and get approved, they had verified a few elevations at that time, and that's when they were,
Yep, I remember they wanted
Probably.
spots all over the
Yeah.
slope too, to know where that was all at. Yeah.
and I don't know that really matters if it is high right now either, it said it's gonna settle, as long as, I think one of our concerns at the time was, you know, clearance with the transmission lines there, that there wasn't some violation, because they had to maintain a certain clearance there. And I think they had plenty of clearance, if I remember, that wasn't gonna be an issue, but.
Their permit from ATC is right at the end of the package from 2016. But yeah, you are correct, that was their concern. Doesn't give any specifications on elevation or anything on it though.
Phase one has had four years to settle already.
Be interesting to know if it is.
Yeah, right.
It's settled.
How much it has settled, is it?
Yeah,
Which I was pretty sure.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
And I don't doubt it at all.
I totally knew what he was doing for it.
Because it's not compacted fill, so.
Oh, right.
Anybody have any more questions for the engineer?
You're looking for a motion to.
I sure am. Keep her moving.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the board for the conditional use grant amendment approval with modifications as presented.
I'll second that.
With
Quick discussion, real quick, to make sure that we use the memo from the village engineer, the conditions on there. There was the 3 items noted there.
correct.
Yeah.
That's the motion. And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm gonna circle back now to item 3. Do we wanna go to 3C and scratch that one off right away?
Either that, or we kick through the other things to cut loose these people before we get there.
Okay,
You know, we can always jump to the reports, like the fire inspector, building inspector.
sure, let's go on to the planning report then.
Sure. With respect to the Hastings project, there's not much of an update to give. Their design architect and engineer were in touch about a week ago, looking for submittal deadlines for the December meeting, January meeting. So I would assume that means that they're planning to make their next submittal one of these meetings ahead. With respect to Peterson Extreme Exteriors, the CSM, they still haven't followed through to have the easement revised that reflects privilege for access through that 30-foot easement that goes out to Highway 164 from the new lot, which has no other public road frontage. The easement has to specifically provide that it's for the benefit of the entirety of this new lot, not just for what was lot 2 that got consumed into it. And so, until they provide that, we can't sign off on that CSM, or we might be creating a landlocked situation.
Is there any sunset date on that? Or does it just go on for,
No, I think the CSM has a drop dead of a year. I think if you don't file a CSM within 6 months or 12 months, I can look into that, Bill, and get back to you next week, or at the next meeting. But there is a sunset on the certified survey.
okay, I'm just curious.
Oh, continuing on, Lana's Papa Stash, the smoker's been put away. It's not out there in the yard anymore. And with respect to the public-private status of Joy Lane, so that was discussed by the planning commission at last month's meeting. Some of the residents were here. There is now a letter that's been drafted that's going to go out under the village president president's signature. It really explains the village's position on this, and basically what it says is that the village has no evidence, no documents, no information to suggest that that was ever dedicated as a public road. So it is a private road. It is privately owned by Joy Bartel, as far as all of our records and the Waukesha County Register of Deeds records are concerned. So it's owned, it's going to be assigned its own tax parcel number. And what's been said in this letter is that the village would gladly assist if the 3 property owners who abut that Joy Bartel property, where there is an easement running through for the benefit of lots 1 and 2, that if the 3 of the property owners get together and decide they would like some assistance to get this thing turned into a public road, we'll be glad to help them along, but it has to start by number 1, getting the owner of the real estate to transfer ownership. Number 2, have some research done on what's built there, so we understand what its base and substance amounts to. Number 3, design some plans for improvements to whatever extent that might be required. Number 4, pay to get it built. The owners would have to pay to get it built. And then, on proper inspections, the village would be asked to accept the dedication of the public road. So it's a very high bar for them, but in the meantime, it really just explains to them that we can't enforce parking regulations on there. It's not a public street. So
We don't plow it.
we don't plow it.
So it does not have a separate tax key at this point
No,
for that road?
no, when that CSM was split off, when they divided the 2 lots out, they never left that as part of that lot, or part of Joy's ownership. It just disappeared. I think the county messed up and never gave it a new number.
It would appear that the intent was really there, that was going to be dedicated,
Right.
but it never happened. And so now exactly what was built in terms of the road is unclear. And so much time has elapsed that nobody can say for sure why it didn't happen, but we can say that it didn't.
So once the tax key is assigned to it, then will there be a little property tax on it? I guess that might generate some activity, I don't know.
It'll be minuscule.
Yeah,
I was
because
gonna say,
it's
what do
not
you
a
value
buildable
that?
lot.
I guess that's
There's nothing
not a-
buildable there, yeah.
Yeah, the cost will be nominal compared to what it'll probably cost to go through the steps to actually get it dedicated.
And it is constrained.
I mean, how would they
easement.
assess that, I guess, that's what I, know how they assess it. No value on a.
On a driveway.
Driveway.
Interesting.
And there was only 30 feet put aside. And so they would also have to approach the village and ask for permission to have a lesser width of right-of-way. Whether the village would be willing to go all the way down to 30, I don't know. But what needs to be built in terms of the width of the road itself, minimally would have to be taken up with the village engineer. So they've got some obstacles ahead if they want to make that public road. And unless the village says we're willing to tackle that project for you,
No, ma'am.
Got enough projects to tackle.
So is that being considered a private street or a private drive?
It is listed as a private driveway with an easement.
Okay.
I believe that's what the CSM calls it.
As I was,
I know we call it Joy Lane because that's the common name for it, but yes, it's Joy Bartel's private driveway with an easement to lots 1 and 2 on it until it was accepted by the village. And they never put the final lift of asphalt on it, and we never accepted it.
on night number 7 of going through the wonderful zoning code.
Wait, let me get my binder.
I happened to notice that there was a difference between private street and private drive, and I was gonna ask that tonight, just so I could get clarification of my own. It would actually fall under both, surprisingly, but, just wondering what we were calling it, so.
Cool, thanks. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Move along to the fire inspector's report.
Okay, I brought up my pump stash, it has been moved in the back. Some landscaping was done around the concrete pad, but no fences ever put up, so you guys know, okay? Fire inspections, went along fine, and, seems to be okay out there. Any questions from you? Anybody got anything?
Last time we spoke, there was, I think, 2 burn permits that were issued. Has there been any more?
Pardon me?
Burn permits? Last time I had asked a couple of months ago, we were still, I think, at 2 burn permits for businesses. Have there been any others? What's that?
Yeah, we're still at that, the 2 burning permits, one would be for, Ridley Door, and, I think the other one for Gator,
No, for Peterson,
Peterson.
for Extreme.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if any others had been issued, just.
No, that I know of. Okay.
Thank you, sir. We'll move along. Item number 7, building inspector's report. Gentlemen?
Complaints have quieted down. Troy Lane popped up once, but then you were copied in on that, Warren. Mary Ann Avenue, there's a process of a guy building an accessory structure that we've all okayed through Eric and Vinny and myself. And the neighbors across the culvert they're not crazy about the culvert across the way, saying it affects their property value. We have no evidence. Eric reached out and talked to the guy this week, and that's pretty much it. We are getting activity on that guy who was here last week, planning commission with the bolt storage. So he did submit Vinny and I drawings that it seems like he is moving forward. I don't know if he did buy the property. Huh? No, so I don't know if he bought the property or not, but, so he did drop off a section of how he's gonna separate it with 3-hour, separation for his.
Yes, I did talk to him specifically about the fire separation between the bolt storage and the S1. So he did follow through, he's got a reputable, architect, engineer on board, gave me some preliminary, sketches on what he's gonna do. So basically what he's gonna do with that building is, I think, 28,000 square feet, something like that. But he's gonna break it up into 3 different sections. So there are 2 different separate 3-hour firewalls with fire doors. So then he can legally have that without sprinkling, and he can use it as S1 or storage for his boats. So there's no fire separation required between the tackle built business and the yarn store, but he does have the other stuff. So he's moving forward on that.
Which building is that?
The old soup or.
Super machine, that's
Oh, yeah, right there, right across there. I saw some activity there, I wondered what it was. No, I
But
don't.
there's a sign up here that says for sale.
Yeah, he followed,
Yeah, the sign is still there.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't know if it was
He
sold.
may be getting prices or something on what's
Right,
gonna
or maybe it's
cost.
contingent on him, if he can't do this, he's not gonna, I'm sure that's not a cheap building. The only other thing, Mary, this gentleman here, he's the guy with the 3/4 acre that we were talking about with the duplex, not the duplex, if we do the rezone or whatever, so, we've been in contact with, him and going that route, so that's why he decided to come out and see what we
I
did.
told Mr. Behringer, John Behringer, that I would bring up the question tonight as a part of the zoning code redraft discussion
Okay.
about whether, and maybe if we want to, it would be nice if the inspectors and we would stay for that part of the discussion, if there's more building inspector report yet, or
No, I'm,
any other reporting.
No, I can't see it, I got a whole list of stuff.
Okay. Then, if you want to move on.
Yep,
For the zoning code?
Sure, yeah, if you're all set, well, we've got the engineer's report.
Fair
All
enough,
done?
no, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. All right, and no correspondence? All right, then we will move back. Do we want to scratch chapter 13 quick?
Yeah,
We don't have it.
I don't have any
Okay.
sense that the DNR has given a,
Yeah,
I
I'll
have a
reach out to
response
Will
on
again
comments.
for an update. But yeah, last we were waiting was an approval from the DNR on our chapter 13 before we go through our motions.
Right.
So
What's chapter, I said we got chapter 14 in front of us as well?
that's next month.
Okay, so just, those one.
Right.
Another one to add to the arsenal. So,
After your,
I gotta read this off here. Item 3C, review, discussion, follow-up, and possible setting of a public hearing date regarding the recently drafted modifications / updates to the village's current code pertaining to chapter 13, construction site erosion and sediment control and post-construction stormwater management. As I said, we'll still wait to hear back from the DNR on their approval of our plans, so when we get that, then we can proceed forward, so we're just gonna kind of
Make
take
a
a list
motion
of
to table it?
Yep.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tabled. Finally, what you all been waiting for, item 3B, review, discussion, and consideration / feedback on various sections of the village's zoning code, for example, chapter 16 of the village ordinances, as part of the process intending to result ultimately in a planning commission recommendation for recodification of the chapter in its entirety.
So my hope was that everybody would review it and really, rather than my start out by saying much, just begin to go around the room, starting with the earliest part of the code and moving back, run through your review, comments, questions, corrections, everything we need to do. Now, Mr. Behringer is here with respect to in the current code, we have R3 single-family residential, and then we have R4 now too, but then we hop from single-family straight over to multifamily. In our multifamily district, which is what you're required to have if you want to build a duplex or more units than two in a single building. That zoning classification requires 1 acre minimum lot size. So Mr. Behringer owns the real estate across 164 Clark Street, just north of the supermarket on the corner, that the church sold out, which they had to give a bunch of real estate to the DOT, and this is remnant real estate. And it has about 0.78 acres of real estate. And he'd like to build a duplex there, so he was going to ask for a rezoning to an RM classification, which is under our current code. But there's not enough real estate there to attach that zoning designation. In the new code, we have a new district that sits between single family and multi, and it's called RP Residential Flex Development. It still has a 1 acre minimum lot size. And the conversation that Mr. Behringer and I had is, well, we can ask the planning commission, is that a lot size that we have to stay attached to? And my original thoughts are, what drives our minimum lot size needs in the village, because we don't have sanitary and water. Partly it's driven by the need for space to put in wells, space to put in septic systems. So I got a chance to talk to Jason earlier today about that and ask, is there a lesser lot size, less than an acre, that we could live with, where somebody could build a duplex and have enough room to put all those facilities in. And I'm going to defer to the inspectors and the engineers to give us feedback on that. The thought we arrived at, though, was that there may be room to write the code so that, much like we did in our 4 district, where we have a 20,000 square foot lot size, but we say you can only use it if you have sanitary sewer available to your lot. You might do the same thing in this case. You might say, maybe you need to have 15,000 square feet per dwelling unit, so you can build a duplex, 3-plex, 4-plex. But you gotta have 15,000 square feet at least if you have sewer, or you have to have an acre minimum to begin with if you don't have sewer. So those are some of the thoughts that have been kind of spun around here in very short order. I'll look for any comments that the inspector and engineer can contribute, and then ask the question of the commission, whether you're interested in reconsidering that option.
Was there any perk testing done on that lot or anything? You know?
Yeah, I had the perk test done, I have the documents here, the Schedule A was done, and then they took the two tax keys and made it the one tax key, the two parcels, so, and it was all resurveyed, so, all that's been done already.
Kind of a bigger area, but you gotta look at your setbacks here.
In the groundwater, I think they went down 10 feet, and it perked for conventional.
And when they did the survey and that, and did you show a building pad on there and where, you know, what size building pad you could have and where the septic system would be in an alternate system site?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, they didn't really give me a building envelope, but they did kind of sketch where a building would go and where the mound would, or I mean, the septic would go.
Yeah, I guess that kind of, you were alluding to Mary a little bit, if there was, like you said, if there was a site-specific qualification in that particular zoning code district, you know, that would be site-specific engineering would allow something other than what,
You really,
based on the lot size.
you really have to look at the lot size, you'd have to look at the private sanitary system.
Right,
Adjacent wells, because you have to have a separation of 50 feet from your well to any private sanitary system.
right,
In this particular case, because it would be a rezone, it's a little easier to come to those conclusions. In a development, as far as, you know, if you want to put a small subdivision in with some two families, that would be a little bit different. We have to be more specific when they came into the proposal, showing the smaller lots, but also the size, similar to what we really did in Lake Park. Maybe a lot of you don't realize it, but it was the Waukesha County Sanitation really took good measures, and we confirmed all locations of every well. We had as-built on the finals to make sure that all the wells were in the right positions. There was one instance where the guy built the well wrong, and he had to move it. So as long as we have that information, it's easier
Right.
to digest, you know. So then you could have the ability to decrease the size of those properties. But that information, again, is essential, because you'd have to make sure, you know, and that's kind of what Waukesha County Sanitation did in Lake Park. We got all the private sanitaries were in the front yard, but then, some of the wells there was a delineation line where the wells could be towards the lake. And then, areas where the lot, so like every other lot, the well was tipped a
On
different
the other side,
other
yeah.
side, yeah.
Yeah, they're staggered on purpose.
Yeah,
yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm referring to. If you have site-specific engineering that indicate that you can
Right.
do that, then it could be approved that way at a smaller lot size.
right.
Might make sense to do it that way.
Yeah, the key is gonna be whether or not we change the code to allow that, or how else would we carve that out? You know, we'd have to modify the perceived future code to allow potentially in the flex or what have you, to lower that lot size to allow them to fit into that zone.
Right, right.
But I think that's kind of
It's
the key.
easy enough to draft,
Mhm.
you know, but the question will be, what is that minimum? So to what extent can the commission flex? How low can you go is kind of the question. So if all the engineering works out perfect, are you gonna allow them to have 10,000 square feet per unit?
What's the square
So if
footage?
you have a duplex, you need a 20,000 square foot lot?
What's the parcel size?
The parcel size?
Parcel size right now is 43,000.
43,
Yeah,
okay.
so it's a 1 acre.
That's our minimum right now.
No, I'm
His
saying this
parcel
one.
size is about 32.
Okay. So it's
About
0.7
3/4 of an
acres.
acre.
Yeah.
I think you said 0.78, if I heard you right.
We had it
Yeah.
on to the,
So on here, when they combine and for the one tax key, it says the pre-recorded document is .780. deeded acres.
And according to the Washington County site, it's .76.
Yeah, so
So we were Waukesha County,
might be some fluctuation.
so it's somewhere in that 30 to 32.
So the key would be if we were willing and able to drop it from the 1 acre, we could drop it down to 3/4 of an acre. Right?
Or 15,000 square feet per unit.
Yeah, correct, yeah, if you split it that way, yeah.
Provided, 15,000 square feet per unit, provided you can demonstrate a
That's
Right,
suitable
provided the engineering for all
on-site
the parameters
services.
that, in relationship to the surrounding lots that all can conform.
So it's
Yeah,
an
it gets
option.
busy right there really quick. There's a lot of lots that converge into
Right,
that
it's-
triangular area.
Mhm.
Because it is a little odd shape.
We've got the,
And I think it kinda makes sense when you have a lot of non-conforming lots within the village. I guess that's kinda where that type of wording, is helpful, so these lots can be developed. We kind of struggled with that over the years on some of those other lots, each time, having to kinda, look at it,
Yeah.
prorate setbacks and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because we're set with what we have now in some of these
Yeah.
instances, so, to be able to utilize some of those lots in a different fashion is probably, something we should look into maybe.
And if you start getting tear downs in there too, where some of those houses are beyond repair, or maybe they say we're gonna tear it down and now we wanna build something new, but they're gonna be kinda stuck.
has there been any historic development on that site prior to this, or has it always been vacant? Do we know?
I don't know the history of that parcel. It's been vacant as long as I'm here.
There were 2 houses on it at one time.
You said 2 houses, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just went down there, redid the road, right?
Yep.
yeah, the last one. was-
Yeah, they moved it, yeah.
But the church took down another house once
Yeah.
before.
Would there be historic?
Yeah, it was Jerry Luther, Jerry Luther's house, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or oil tanks, I don't know.
Well, not even that, but just the, wellhead itself, I didn't know if it would have been abandoned or if it's still there.
I'm not familiar with the site firsthand.
I'm sure that they were abandoned. There's probably 2 wells on the property.
Are you looking for a common common septic between the 2 portions of the duplex?
Well, yeah, that was a question also, if that would be doable.
Yeah. that
Does
makes
the county
sense.
allow that?
Well, there's not, that would be, that would be up to Washington County, but yeah, typically, there's never a problem with the shared well, you can do that all over the state. Sizing your private sanitary system, it's gonna depend on what you have for, how many bedrooms you're gonna have. So that's something you're gonna have to pursue with Washington County Sanitation. But it's conceivable that you can do that. And it's gonna be specifically it's gonna be specifically a duplex, not ever be converted to a condo unit or anything.
Yeah, right.
because You don't have separate utilities.
Attached garages?
Yeah, I'm in I really don't even have a drawing or nothing, because I just wanted to, before I did that, I wanted to see if it was doable or, so. I can conform to pretty much anything, so,
I was just thinking about parking, I guess, just
yeah.
garage or street, or how they do that.
Yeah, it's adjacent to the business zoning there too, so I don't see a problem with that zoning classification or anything there,
Mhm.
as far as that part of it goes. Just a matter of making that modification to make it, allow it to fit, I guess that's.
Right. So, would you like to?
So I guess I'd like to see
Question right
that,
away?
yeah, I guess I'd like to see that modified, as long as we're in the middle of that that makes sense for other lots that are still out there.
Mhm.
Address the other one we talked about earlier too.
Over in the pond,
Which one?
over in the
Oh,
pond.
that one's already rezoned?
That was rezoned at one point, yeah.
Across from Papa's?
How did that get rezoned? I mean, I know it did, and I know it went through planning commission. I can't find my staff reports on it, but there should be minutes. I can see that it happened in 2016.
I was gonna say, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
No.
It was almost 4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, but he does not have an acre there.
No, again, that's what I'd say, that's where we kinda struggle with some of these other lots, it's
Yeah,
a fixed lot that's already existing and
yeah.
Yeah.
and there's multifamily, you know, zoning across the street from it,
Right.
you know, adjacent, you know, that, from that standpoint.
So how are we looking to modify that? And
Looking at changing the proposed residential flex district, the RP district, from having a minimum 1 acre lot size to having a 15,000 square foot per unit lot size, provided the applicant can demonstrate that on-site services can be provided according to code, septic and water, sanitary.
So I'm just asking a question on this RP, because this is new. So that is, it's like a, is it like a, it's a multi-family, but it's not like the RM was pretty much dedicated more to 2 families? This is multi-family?
RP would be everything up to a 4-family.
Up to a 4-family. Okay, so if you put a 4-family on this, you'd have to have basically 60,000 square feet.
60,000,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Is a 200-foot lot width
that's what I was just gonna ask.
reasonable when you're talking about a,
So,
you're
Kind of a
talking
lot
about
width is that?
30,000
just
square
curious.
foot lot? That one will have
Yeah,
lots of
that-
width.
Lots of,
Yeah.
not a lot of depth.
Designer friendly there.
I guess that brings up the other question, because it does have setback minimum of 35 feet, to 20 feet from the side and rear lot lines too. How's that gonna pinch it down? Would be a question to ask.
Okay, 0.7 meters an acre, that's about 180.
How deep is that lot?
Yeah, this is.
No, I
Yeah,
know
this
it's
one
not,
is
but I'm
quite elongated, but yeah, it should be,
It's kind of weird.
Mhm. No,
No,
right.
it's the east of the north too.
Yeah, that's, it's kind of a weird shape.
No, it's- on the narrow end, it's 96.68 feet. And the wide end is, it's around 175 feet deep, so there's one narrow spot in the middle that's, looks like it's 88.8, where it kinda jogs in and over.
So if that's an issue in this case, that's one thing, but
Which one
you really wanna write the code based on the ordinary expectations for platted lots.
So, whenever,
This is him right
and this was before I came into planning, you guys went through some of the zoning where RP residential was suggested. When was it originally put in at 1 acre? Was that just the normal set standard that communities have? Or was that based upon any particular,
It was really based on the RM district being at 1 acre,
okay,
and those same considerations, what, if you're allowing up to 4 units, an acre seems like an absolute minimum,
So RM would be meant for 4+,
5+.
5+, okay. And then RP would be 1 to 4,
2 to 4.
2 to 4, okay. Sorry, yeah, 2 to 4.
I'd have to look back in the code, we probably allow single family in the RP under the redraft.
I don't remember that it actually specifies 2 to 4. Oh, yeah, here it goes, right there.
Yeah, it does say that.
Under permitted use of structures number 2,
Okay.
up to 4 residential dwellings for RP, no less than 2.
This is no less than 2 attached to parking stalls, plus one paved.
And this is a little bit different, because where it's configured here, it's conceivable that we have an option in a code section that's gonna give you an averaging. There are established residences on both sides of this, correct? There's established buildings on both sides.
Yeah, the one is the liquor store, and then there's a residence north of that.
So on this particular parcel, he would probably, you would be able to.
Setback can be
average
reduced
separate
because of
averaging
averaging.
can be reduced, correct.
So if we're gonna have to adjust the setbacks hypothetically, then it would be non-conforming anyway, do we really need to try to adjust the lot size down to 15,000 from 1 acre? Or do we just non-conform the whole site?
You're talking about his,
Well, yeah, instead of changing the zoning proposal to fit one location,
Well, we're not talking just that location, though, there's other locations. Where it would be
There
similar.
may be.
where this would be used.
Where this would be used.
and that's why, and again, I wasn't here when you guys initially went through it and settled on 1 acre size. And I wanna make sure that we're not gonna shortchange ourselves by dropping it down to a quarter of what it was.
I'm noticing that we do say in the code under RP, under the draft code, that it allows as a permitted use buildings containing up to 4 residential dwelling units. So that would include a 1 family, right? And if we're saying 15,000 square feet per dwelling unit as the minimum lot size,
You're capping it at 2.
well, you're allowing a 15,000 square foot single family lot.
That
So I think that's a change that I think we need to make.
one would have to go with the other.
That it's gotta be buildings containing 2 to 4 residential units.
Correct, yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably a better way to go.
We got lots less than 15,000 square feet.
We do,
That's true.
but this is intended as kind of that transitional district where you're moving from commercial
Right.
to single family, and you wanna buffer that a little bit.
Correct.
It's just that in-between district that fits in certain places.
So then, if we change the lot size of a minimum of 1 acre, then to 15,000 feet, then we'd have to go to the density under subpart B of 5. And look at not just the dwelling size, but the minimum open space of 20,000 square foot per building. Because obviously, that's more open space than there would be on a given 15,000 feet.
Yeah,
So now we're changing everything on it.
well, I don't know. So in the case of the minimum building requirement is 2 to 4 units. So you're gonna have at least 30,000 square feet. I don't expect the house with the attached, the duplex with the attached
10,000 square feet.
Yeah, that'd be
to
pretty
take up
good.
10,000.
Right, but
So
you-
20 should still be a
Right.
rational number.
But you're saying the lot size is 15,000 square feet.
Per unit.
Per unit.
Minimum 2 units.
So it'd be 30,000,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Or should we just say minimum lot size 30,000, provided you can can demonstrate. Why go per unit since the requirements are 2 to 4 units?
Yeah, because if you do the per unit, when you think about that, if we did a 15K, you're talking, there's a requirement of 60,000 square foot lot now for a 4 unit. When before we were saying 1 acre sufficed. So we're actually increasing
Yeah, right.
on that scenario. So that's why I was originally saying is that maybe we just drop it down to the 0.75, the 3/4 acres. That fits that need and then it stays nice and easy from a calculation standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It still opens the doors for these other lots that may fit this zoning better now because of dropping the acreage, a 1/4 acre. From a rezone perspective, or opportunity.
I would think 30 would work. 30 as your minimum lot size, provided you can demonstrate that on-site systems can be,
Support the services.
legally located. Let it go at that.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty tough for a 4-family, but
Right,
you gotta prove it if you wanna build it.
that's right.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it doesn't work for formula, then we don't want a 4-family there, I guess that's
Right.
what amounts to.
Right.
Well, then it would get kicked to the RM residential because that states buildings containing up to 16 residential dwelling units per building. So that would, you could do it at 2, you could do it at 4, under the way that that's written. And that does state 1 acre minimum.
Yeah, but it's self-regulating, you know, if you think you can fit 5 units on an acre, go for it. Because the RM is basically 5 to, is it 18 or 16?
60.
16, yeah.
So to answer your question, it would appear that it could be feasible.
Okay.
Not today it couldn't be, but maybe.
What was the thought to drop it to 30,000 or just do the 3/4 acre?
I think the other residential districts are all, other than the 1 acre, are all 20,000 or, you know, they're all numbers like that, not a half acre.
So I'm just doing the math, so 30,000 is about 0.68 acres. If you did 3/4 of an acre, it's 32,670. Is what it is.
And John, what did we decide that you had on the low end?
0.76.
Okay,
Correct.
so 30,000 would be, Well-
Either one would work, really.
Yeah, for consistency through the zoning code there, you know, all the other residential districts are all 15,000, 20,000, that kind of thing. Very makes sense.
There's a oral agreement to make that modification to the future draft.
Change it from 1 acre to 30,000 feet.
30,000 square feet if the applicant proves capable.
Services.
I am just gonna come up with a design.
You've been given your box to play in.
You were saying the setbacks are different then?
Now, the setbacks could conceivably be different because of averaging, what we can do for averaging.
Using
And
the
that's,
adjoining
that's
properties.
down the road, yeah,
Okay.
so,
See what
you're just
walks.
looking to see what was happening now, and then you have to,
it's 35 and 20, but there's an averaging provision in the code where they'll look at the neighboring buildings and their setbacks. Okay, well, that's one down.
Allow some people to leave if they'd like.
So how are you gonna go through this? Start with the beginning or?
I really, however you guys feel comfortable doing it. Some of you, I would guess, Vince, I'm sure you have like a list that you'd like to run through, once we start with you.
Just real quick.
And eventually, some of these are gonna start to duplicate in our, everybody's list, and I get
Alright,
Just real quick, because I do have to leave a little bit early tonight to go get my son, are we looking to like wholly approve this tonight, or are we just starting to look at it and go through the list?
I don't think we could wholly approve it. I think there's, figure out what red lines have to occur that we know of right now, because then we'll stumble across more, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna have to look at it, in my opinion, just to make sure if we go through all these things, just to get some
I
input.
mean, I guess what I'm saying, are we gonna start on it this month and then maybe wrap it up next month, or
I would,
have
I think it'll
changes?
depend on how many changes there are tonight and how substantial
Yeah,
they
'cause we pretty much redlined everything already, you know, gone through and.
Right,
Been countless hours to get to that point. So the hope is it was a much smaller section now, or amount of hours to finish it up.
I get it.
If you're asking, you have more time to make your comments, yes.
Yeah, that's basically what I was wondering, because I just, I
Give it
was,
to the next meeting at least.
okay, I had,
We'll have one more kick at it at least.
okay,
Right,
that's fine.
and what gets changed by tonight's discussion will probably be reflected in what you get in next month's packet.
Okay,
So you'll be able to kind of see what the,
sure. I appreciate that.
yeah. All right, Vince?
Alright, so first of all, I wanna say it's a monumental task, because we've had several zoning codes that we went through. I mean, I think I have a zoning book here that's different than the zoning book you have here. And so there's different codifications, and so I've kind of tried to go on the zoning code that I had, zoning code that we're proposing, and, it was a monumental task, but we've been slowly, over the last 5, 6 years, changing things, getting things up to snuff that we're supposed to do, so. I'm just gonna go over this because it's just, there's some questions that I have. Just bear with me a little bit here.
I appreciate it, Vince. There's no thin skin here.
On page
Yeah,
seven,
as we're going through this over the months and months and months, it often comes up, well, that's maybe a Vince question, or hopefully
Yeah.
Vince has some input kind of thing, 'cause-
Hindsight being 20/20, you should have been here with us that
Yeah.
whole time. It would have been so enjoyable.
Invited me every
And by the
day.
way, I know the accessory structures are supposed to be 18 feet tall.
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay, that was my question.
I had that earmarked
I
too.
really was
so.
saying, you know, we reduced it from, it was 15-foot average,
Changed
we
the
give you
definition,
20
that's
feet.
correct.
So we actually would have reduced it considerably, probably 5 feet less than
I
we were
know,
allowed.
no, that's a
Okay.
a
Wow, I feel
transcribing
better
error that I saw right away. Yeah.
Alright, okay, so I think one of those things was building height that I had talked about on page 7. Also, that was in definitions. I think there was something about,
So,
definition
so what was it with building height?
The maximum building height under the existing code is, for accessory buildings, is 15 feet. But the way our definition read, and it's a rather confusing definition in the current code, it reads that the height is measured to the midpoint of the gable
Yeah, it was.
from the wall, top of the wall to the top of the highest point on the ridge. So we simplified the definition and said, building height's gonna be measured at the highest point on the ridge line, highest point on the building, measured at the front of the building, and height is gonna be moved up to 18 feet for accessory
You know,
buildings.
it doesn't give any height on here to, if you're looking at definition number 10 for building height on page 7.
That's just how we calculate.
That's the definition, not the,
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Vince, do you know what page accessory strucures?
That's what I was asking, I didn't,
Well,
I was reading this.
I'm gonna kind of go through this
Catch it up.
from page 1 all the way down, if
Perfect.
you can bear with me. The other question, domestic, under, I think I had a question on domestic livestock, central building and community. Sheep, rabbits, ducks, chickens. No, maybe that's not what the one I was looking for. I'll come back to that one. Page 12. We talked about area to Florida area ratio. So,
Page 44 is your accessory uses and structures, Mary.
Oh, thank you. Kind of turn that page sideways.
so area to floor ratio starts on page, I believe page 12 on the bottom. It kind of defines it, 50, allows 50, a floor ratio of 50, where 1/2 the total lot for a, so when we get into a percentage of the area to floor ratio and we do a definition of this, the way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can have, on your lot, you could, a ranch style home would allow 50% of your lot to be used in the area to floor ratio. But yet, a two-story building will only allow you to have 25% of the lot.
No.
So you count the first floor and the second floor. That's the old way that you used to do floor area floor ratio. But typically, they've changed, zoning codes have changed substantially over the last 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
where you pretty much define floor area ratio is a 50% rule. You don't circumvent the issue with the two-story as 25%. So you're really not allowing them to utilize much of their property, as much of their property versus a single-family dwelling, or, I'm sorry, a ranch dwelling.
Yeah, I don't know why a second
So case in
story-
point, I'll give you an example. on
This
what-
is just the definition.
Yeah, that's the key, like, I think that's where he would get a little confused too, the definition isn't necessarily the meat of it, it's a high level,
Right.
what does
But
this
the,
word
but the
mean?
definition of area flow ratio does give you your determination factor.
It does.
So,
In this
so-
case, you're saying
right,
it's,
right,
it's
in
spelled out
this
there, yeah.
particular case. So, case in point, okay, so I have a gentleman who's got a two-story home, okay? So he actually wanted to put an addition on his home. Well, because of the area to floor ratio is reduced for a two-story, he could put the addition put addition on his second story, but he couldn't use it as living space. He's gonna use only a 10-foot section of living space, put another section of 10-foot that he could legally use it, but not use it for living space. So when you do the area to floor ratio that way, it kind of minimizes what you can do with a two-story residence. So Waukesha County, Walworth County, a lot of the townships and the villages in the area have changed that to basically say area to floor ratio of 50% is equal to for either a ranch or a two-story. So I'm just giving you this information, and you're gonna decide what it is. I'm just giving you some scenarios.
So it's not the definition you don't like, because that is the definition of floor area ratio,
Right,
right? It's the
Well-
total square footage divided by the lot area.
right. Right, what I'm
It's
saying
the,
is.
it's the
when we-
percentages in the districts that you're uncomfortable with. Or it's that in a two-story,
That's
the
what,
presumption
right,
is that your two-story square footage is still gonna come out, you know, either I'm gonna build an 1,800 square foot ranch, or I'm gonna build an 1,800 square foot two-story.
right.
Either way, my minimum lot size is still 20,000 square feet, and my floor area ratio is still gonna work out to the same number.
Well, what I'm saying, it restricts the two-story. Because you're only allowing 25% versus single ranch at 50.
No,
The way it's worded is confusing, and I see what he's saying.
I think that's why. I think
It
it's
is.
It says a floor area ratio of
The
50%
last
can be
sentence
applied to a
maybe
one-story building occupying 50% lot or a two-story building occupying only 25% of the lot.
Yeah.
And you see what I'm
That's-
Yeah,
saying?
because it says
Go
two-story
away.
building, it's not the square footage anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I think like Mary just said, I think that sentence as a whole could be
Yeah.
struck.
If we
Right,
took that
because that is
sentence out,
misleading.
Yeah, I'm just throwing this stuff
Yeah.
out to you guys, just to give you, something.
Because we have the other pieces that help control the sizing, we don't need that sentence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's other provisions in the zoning district that also, have to do with that area flow
Right.
ratio because of the amount of lot size and stuff. Really doesn't come into play that much, your open space and other things do,
yeah,
so.
all those parameters build the picture of what can go on the lot. You gotta meet open space, you gotta stay within floor area maximum, you gotta meet setbacks and offsets, minimum home size, and it all should back down into a buildable plan.
Okay.
Try to strike that last sentence.
Yeah, I agree, that's confusing.
Okay, and you're gonna have to help me on this one, Mary, 'cause we went through our drainage regulations with a 1 foot separation, and in the code section that I have in this zoning code, on page 51, I've got drainage regulations, which pertain to 1 foot seasonal high groundwater separation, etc. Did we move that in this new one that maybe I missed it, but I thought I went through this several times.
Yeah, so all of,
That's in its own chapter now, right?
it is, it's all moved into chapter, and I'll find the spot here, Vince. What happens. If you look at page 33 of the proposed redraft, you'll see right above paragraph 16.09, the erosion control and stormwater management section has been moved entirely into the village's code, chapter 13.
It's a comment to the board.
Right here.
Right.
So now, those drainage regulations you're referring to, where were they contained in the code?
He
They
said
were
page-
under drainage. Well, that's what kind of was confusing, because I went through this one next to this one to see if we had any issues.
Where is
It
it?
was in page
In the
50.
spiral bound.
Page 51,
I
right?
think it's in page 51.
That's what he called out.
Drainage regulation, adequate drainage required. So that's no longer in our zoning code, it's more of a,
It's in its own chapter.
chapter 13 is more of a policing code, correct?
No, chapter 13 is stormwater management and erosion control.
But, I mean, it's not completely separate from the zone.
Sure, it's not gonna be built into
Yeah.
the zoning code, it's its own section.
Okay.
It's all encompassing.
Good, good.
And that started even before we started the refortification, right? That thing had been, that part was in motion for a while.
Okay, page 41. So, in this, in the, under averaging, so under averaging, maybe you can help me. Right now, we do an averaging, what we do, typically what you do for an averaging is, you take, if you have a non-conforming lot, you take the width of the non-conforming lot, say it's 83 feet, and you divide that by the necessary minimum requirement for that lot width. Then you come up with a formula, then you multiply that by either your setback or your offset. In this particular case, and I'm just asking this question because I want to know if you know. But in this, the way we do it, we use like 102 as our minimum lot size, no matter what the lot size is. Is there any reason for that?
In the case of any legal lot of record which has a minimum average width less than 102, is that what you're saying?
No, legal lot has a minimum average width of less than 120. The offset from the, is reduced proportionally to the ratio between the minimum average width of 120 may be reduced between the actual width of 120 and 201, or 102, I'm sorry. So I'm just wondering if you have any background in that, because that's typically not how they're written.
That is the current code, so that didn't
Right.
get changed.
Okay.
What is that 102?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
I'm guessing that's a typo
The
in the
typo.
original code.
Typo 120 and
Yeah.
102.
Yeah, I think
102
that's
seems
just
like
a,
a Google
No,
number.
no, well, typically, like I'm saying, 120, so in this particular case,
Right.
if it's less than 120, then you can, with the average is less than 120, you use those denominators, but it's usually, it's always the denominator or the existing lot width of the non-conforming lot,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think it's just typo,
You know-
transposing it 2 and 0. Is that
Well,
what I'm
it
thinking?
may have been, but it just still doesn't really make much sense, because
Yeah.
you'd have to say that it would have to be the difference between the minimum lot requirement, the existing lot, and the minimum lot requirement of that zoning district.
Yeah.
The
it's
120
usually
is
if
the
you're-
only time you can use it if it's under 120.
Yeah. If your lot width is 70% of the required lot width, then your offset is gonna be 70% of the required offset.
Right, you multiply your offset or your setback by that formula. that we're talking
Yeah,
about. So I'm
exactly, so,
kinda asking, because it just seemed odd when I went through it. And it's been odd since we've had it, so
equal the proportionate amount
this is the time where I'm just,
between the actual width and 120. 120 would make sense there, between the actual width and 120. But not less than 5 feet.
well, typically it's not, you don't have it, you typically use the, like in the R1, R2, R3, or R4 zoning district, it would have a minimum width on those districts. So you would use that as your,
Right.
you divide that into the actual width of the non-conforming lot.
But I think this
And
is
then you-
intended to give more grace than that. So at the time this was written anyway, the intention must have been to give more grace than the typical 150-foot minimum lot width, or the 250-foot, or 200 lot width.
The actual width, and then, too, it just doesn't make any sense to me, I don't know. So that's just something, I mean, that's just something that I'm
So,
sure we might wanna think about.
Okay, so if they have a lot size of 120, I'm sorry, if they have a lot size of 100,
Right,
your proportionate amount, your differential proportional amount between 100 and 120 would be 20, and then you take that ratio and you basically reduce it by 20%.
Yeah,
So that would mean that you have a setback reduction of 20%.
right.
That's the way I understand it. So it'd just be reverse numbers instead of 102, it'd be 120.
Right.
If I'm looking at that.
I think what you're saying, Vince, is it should say, like, you're saying it shouldn't even define the 120, because
correct. Well, you get, the 120 in the beginning of the sentence is in case of any legal lot of record, which is a minimum average width of less than 120, that's telling us that that lot has to be less than 120 for us to even do the offset and the averaging, okay? That's what 120 is telling us. So, but what I'm saying is typically say that lot, so say we have example is your 100, right? And in the R2 zoning district, well, let's just look at, what is the minimum width lot in the R2 zoning district area? Can you look
In
at
the
it?
R2
I'm having it off the top of my head.
150 feet.
150. So say what you got your thing out, what's 100 divided by 150? .666, and it's a 20-foot offset, so times 20. So 13.33 feet is what we could reduce it to.
Right, but not less than 5 feet. It's
Not
still
less
in
than
there.
5, correct,
Right.
yep.
So you've got it.
Okay.
Yep, so then if we, let's just look at, so that would be, what do we say, 13.6? So we use this, reduce the ratio between the minimum width, so let's just say minimum width is 100, okay? between the actual width, which is 100,
And 120.
divided by 102.
Oh, two.
He's using what the verbiage is right now.
Times 20. See,
I think-
19.6.
I think after 120, you cross out in
Oh.
width or less may be reduced to an amount. I think you say, may be reduced proportionately to the ratio between the actual minimum average width and 120 feet, but not less than 5 feet.
But what I'm saying is, if you're gonna use that scenario, your reduction's gonna be really very, very tiny. Your reduction is very minimal, because it's only not even a foot, right?
19.6.
Which is not typical.
Well, that's what you did on 100 and
Well, 100, 150, we have 13 foot, 6 inches. Reduce the offset to 13.6. But the way this is set up, I have no idea where the 102, like I say.
Yeah, I wonder if that just needs to be struck, if the
That's why
one
I'm
twenty's on
saying,
the front
get
end
rid
of
I mean,
it.
it should be the difference, with, for all of the zoning that I'm aware of. It's always the difference between the size of that non-conforming lot
And the
And-
required
and the
width,
required width
Of the district it's
of
in.
the district it's in.
The zoning, yeah.
that's pretty customary.
Yes, it is.
The only reason I'm questioning this is because it was in the book this way to
I know,
begin with.
I know, I don't always,
So cleaning it up is a good thing.
I know, that's why I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to go through it, 'cause I always question why we're doing that.
Yeah.
So if you have an actual minimum average width of 100 feet, you take 120 minus 100 and you get 20 feet. So 20 divided by 120 to get your proportion is 0.16. So what's your setback, 20 feet off the lot line? Is that your normal, standard?
No, just 20. But that's not, but what you're doing is,
Yeah.
you don't subtract it, you divide it.
Yeah.
So if I have a lot, if I have a lot of 100, and we're at 150, so 100 divided by 150 gives us,
The 0.66.
and then we multiply that by our minimum setback requirement, our offset requirement could be 20, so we come out to 13.6.
Actually, that come out to 16.67 feet, gives you a reduction of a little bit less than 4 feet. If you have a minimum width average of 100 feet as compared to the minimum of 120.
But he was using a 150 step.
No, I'm using,
Well,
that,
you're using
yeah, I'm
120,
using the
right.
150 because that's the minimum in that zoning district that we did. the
Yeah,
exact-
based on the one you just asked for, which
Right.
was two, yeah, our.
I think the
I
minimum,
got you, Tony.
Yeah,
I think the way you're talking about is the right way to go.
Right.
It absolutely is.
Make it a proportion that's measured against the required minimum lot width and the actual minimum lot width.
sure.
And then attach that same proportion to the offset.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a pain, I'm just saying, this is, I mean,
Yep,
it's pretty standard verbiage, you know, it's all.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know why they would have wanted to give that much grace. I don't,
And it wouldn't matter, I mean, it's defining a legal lot on record at average width of less than 120 feet, but if you have a 200 foot, if the district called for 200 feet, it could be 150 foot, and that wouldn't even apply. They
Right,
could
correct,
place them in.
correct. So it's all for the smaller lots,
Yeah.
non-conforming lots, or lots that are legal, but they're, you
Is,
know,
can, whatever you guys just update, can you just send it out an email in a couple days or something, or do I just wait till next month?
all these updates will be captured in a new red line
Okay,
that will come out in advance of your next planning commission meeting.
okay, I appreciate it, thank you so much, but I gotta go.
Yep.
I gotta go grab the boy, it's getting late for school night, so,
Thanks, Tom.
alright, thank you so much.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too, all of you have a good Thanksgiving.
You too?
No traveling and no having anybody over.
Yeah, I don't see it anymore.
You can't see anybody.
pretty much don't do much.
Have fun sitting in your house by yourself.
Yeah, I went to a retirement party.
I said, no more fun of any kind. Right, no
And I
smile.
was,
Don't come chewing.
I'm 20, almost 17 days old.
No singing.
You okay? Yeah, fine. Yeah, a couple days sniffles, but you're right. Take care.
Yeah. Okay, one question on page 42, maintenance, and this is I'm just throwing this on here. Maintenance and use of setback and offset areas. Any such required setback, this includes the setbacks and the offset, shall be landscaped, kept clean and free from the accumulation of debris or refuse and may not be used for storage or display of equipment. But then, I think this was added, it's vehicles, boats, trailers, so in the setback, in the setback, which is on your driveway, we're not allowing trailers or boats or
Or a vehicle. Can't park it.
Vehicles, yeah.
The driveway should be an exception to that setback
Oh,
area.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say maintenance of setback and offset areas, and then break it down so that, you know, storage of equipment, vehicles, boats, in the offset areas, that's pretty common. You know, you know what I'm saying?
Don't allow
If
it.
not, well, it's up to you, whatever you wanna do, but typically that's, most of them are written that in the offset areas is where you don't want people parking right next to a lot line or anything, you know?
There's a whole
So
lot
if
of
they're
that
gonna
around
store
there.
something, it would be 20 feet off the lot line or something like that. But I'd be worried about the setback, cause you got vehicles that are gonna be parked there all the time, you know, boats are gonna be parked there pretty much.
Unless parked on a properly surfaced driveway.
I like how it's, has the, exemption right there for firewood.
Neatly stacked.
Neatly stacked. Vince, we're gonna task you guys for finding out if firewood is neatly stacked or not.
Criteria.
We're gonna have to have something in the code that kinda shows neatly stacked.
We'll get you.
It's
Do an appendix.
already that way.
Possible rendering.
Hopefully you've been enforcing it.
Do that Swedish circle they do.
Right. Okay, next, on page 42.
We stack
and this is-
everything different. They stack,
Yeah.
stack bales of hay different.
This is something that we kinda talked about, Mary, and Plan Commission has done it, and I've seen a lot of other different plan commissions. We have an exception to our height restrictions for, subject approval, Plan Commission, Village Board, cooling towers, bulkheads, fire towers, monument stack. What about cupolas or ornate structures on, like, detached accessory structure buildings, or
John Peters called me on
Yeah.
that 2 days
I was
ago.
gonna say, that sounds
I mean,
awful.
yeah, but we're even talking about, you know,
Yeah.
certain things as far as, and I know this is probably far-fetched, but it can happen. I see a lot of, you know, the metal buildings, the pole barn houses now and stuff like that with cupolas and stuff on there, so
Yeah.
it'd be easier if we kind of figured out what we were gonna
What would
use.
be the difference between an ornamental tower and a cupola?
Well, we tried to interpret that.
I know.
and,
It's an ornamental tower that goes
Yeah.
on the ridge of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would put in the word
If
cupola,
you're comfortable with
and I would
that,
put
that's
in
fine.
the
I'm
word
just-
weather vane,
Yeah.
just to cover those two specifics.
Right.
Are there others that come to mind for you, Vince? Other specific,
Not really, because a lot of times when
Terms.
when they go to different plan commissions, when they're for accessory structures, one of the things that the plan commissions are saying is, hey, let's decorate this accessory structure up a little bit better, you know, let's put cupolas on it, and let's put wainscoting on it and some other ornamental things. So
Now
I'm
it's gonna
just,
hurt you because you're max height, but, yeah.
right,
So we're saying that those would be exceptions to the measurement, right? That you'd be using the actual roof height, so to speak, and not these ornamental pieces that stick up higher.
right, so
Okay.
I asked John, to refresh my memory, how tall was his cupola? And then how tall is his weather vane? Because you might wanna say.
yeah, you
that
might
there's
wanna
a-
say
there's
not
a
to exceed
maximum.
3 feet over the highest peak or whatever.
Right, so
whatever
he's
the plan
4 feet
commission-
over from the ridge line to the top of the weather vane, cause he goes cupola weather vane.
Yeah,
Because proportionally, you probably need that.
Well, if you're gonna put a weather vane in a cupola, yeah, you probably do.
Yeah, to make it look right, otherwise it would look
Mhm.
small on top of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, so if you, plan commission would think about something like that, and just
And not
throwing
to
stuff
exceed.
out.
right. Yeah, what would be a good number, 4 feet?
How tall are lightning rods? You don't see them
Usually
putting
only-
on.
I don't see them
Those are
up
only
there.
like 32 inches, actually.
Yeah,
Should that be in here?
do we even worry about it?
I have had a couple lightning rods.
That could be a spire, right?
Lightning rods, you can't even, aren't even visible, really.
Well, you put a big colored ball on it.
Yeah, those are, yeah.
Now we know where you can find those.
old barn.
Yeah, there used to be some in our barn when I was a kid, but some
So you
kids
shut
like me
'em
got
off.
shut them off.
I was gonna say,
I'm not mentioning any names.
Do we even have to go into that much detail?
That's
I
what I'm
noticed-
saying, do we even worry
I
about it?
noticed in some of these other sections that we actually crossed out quite a bit of the example type stuff and just said it's up to the approval of the planning
Right,
commission.
right.
Yeah, and
I
that's what,
agree, yeah, you're
that's what I
right.
think, that's what I was saying, is I don't even know if we have to spell out a not to exceed, because ultimately their plan has to be submitted. If something's grossly unproportionate,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it, you know, and get it modified before any kind of an approval, as long as they're meeting the big requirements as far as the square footage, the setbacks, the standard building height
Right, and then
outside
if-
of the accessory stuff.
Right, and then as long as they know that they can.
I'd like to
they
give
can
them
do it.
some stuff that they can plan immediately to include in their project as an exemption, and still add that language you're talking about, that, the planning commission can, you know, exempt.
No, it's already in there,
Discretion.
I just,
Yeah.
just in a lot of the other stuff, we've crossed out the example list of things and not repopulated it with any other examples.
Oh, okay. I didn't reread the whole paragraph. You're right, so all of these require planning commission approval still.
Right. It's in there.
Is there a catch-all?
By the way, in that first, 1612, under, subpart 1 there, altered to a height and it says access, but it should be excess. Just a semantic point there. I mean, I'm all for giving examples.
Good catch, Billy. Yeah, I don't think you wanna put a 4-foot limit, I mean, if someone has a ham radio
They're
tower or
gonna
something.
be- You guys are gonna be reviewing them all anyway,
Right.
so at least you're gonna give yourself some more flexibility, I'll take a look, and you're gonna, you're gonna notice right away if you think it's out of the ordinary.
Mhm. And you'll know right away that it's something you have the purview to approve. That's where we got into the gray area to begin with, was we were splitting hairs on whether a cupola was an approvable exception.
I don't even know how to spell that.
Ends with a name.
L in there too.
Francis Cupola, you know.
Ford Coupe.
Thanks, Eric.
Francis Ford, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And on page 43, just a question. Under lot size, C, the lot shall be at least as wide as the specified minimum average width. Before it was
Measured at the building.
measured at the building. So what, in that case,
No, it's supposed to say measured at the building setback line.
okay, but you're still really gonna, these are gonna be pie-shaped things that are V-shaped lots. You know, before when you're half that lot, you know, you're configuring it and you're still gonna be able to put that building up. So what happens in this, and it happened in the community, and they changed it, and then they changed it back, they started doing some of this stuff. All the houses, instead of being uniformity in some of the lots, they give them back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So, I was just wondering what we're thinking on that, what we're accomplishing on that one.
Typically, that would say at the building setback line.
Measured, yeah, so before it was for at least a width, at least half the lot depth. But now, because, if the depth, that's basically 100 feet, most of our lots. Now you're gonna bring it down to, 35 to 50 feet, So it's gonna be really, instead of a tapered lot like this, it's gonna be, a lot wider.
Okay, now that we're at 35-foot setbacks. Yeah, versus 50-foot setback.
Well, even at 50, it would still would have been the same thing, and the difference between the 15 feet isn't as bad as half the lot,
Yeah.
so.
So, what are you recommending?
I'm not recommending anything, I'm just kinda saying that the one action, creates a different reaction.
Okay. I'll look at at that.
Yeah,
But I do think that for the most part, we're probably gonna see that that's the standard.
but some of our, on the cul-de-sac lots, this could be problematic.
There's usually an exception built in the division and platting section of the code for cul-de-sac lots.
I just went through it, so I just, something I saw.
Yeah, I will look into that one
Okay.
and talk to you about it.
Okay, page 45. I got attached accessory structures. So, and I have no problem with this whatsoever, but I just, for detached accessory structure 600, so anything at 600 square feet or larger, we'll do a deed restriction. So we're not gonna parallel the 800 square feet for planning commission, we'll go down to 6. Alright,
Say that again?
well, typically,
Not going to-
you know, if it's 800 square feet, it comes to plan, or greater comes to planning commission. But, anything under that, we can approve it
Staff level.
at a staff level to, so 600 is where you're looking for?
For deed restrictions.
For deed restriction, right, correct.
But that doesn't mean it has to come to the planning.
No, I know,
Okay.
but I'm just saying typically, a lot of times if it kicks in the planning commission, that's when the deed restriction kicks in.
Okay,
Typically it's 800 or 900 or 1,000 square feet is where most of them have deed restrictions. I have no problem with it whatsoever, I'm just saying.
You're just commenting on the two numbers being different, and whether or not it makes sense to make them the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
well, we do have a kick-in at some point for planning commission review of a certain sized accessory structure.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah,
about the
right,
800.
800, right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what he's saying,
So
so you
that's
have
what-
that at 800, but yet you're saying a deed restriction kicks in at 600.
I think it should kick in at that lesser amount.
That's fine with me.
I mean, 600 is
Doesn't matter.
plenty of room to fire up a home occupation that you really don't wanna see get started in.
Yep, and
accessory
that
structure.
tool does work.
Yep.
It does work.
Yep.
So then on page 46. Bear with me on this stuff, guys.
It's all good questions.
When we did this code, Mary, and we have the code section, that was adopted,
Good, you want to sit on the table?
I was just gonna say, if it helps you spread out, you can take Tom's seat,
Yeah. Be a little
so you're not playing on the
easier.
floor.
46.
Your face is getting redder as
I
you
could probably
think
do
over
that.
one.
I could pass out with blood rushing.
Yeah, I know, you know.
Take it back out now, I'll keep you around all that.
You just got somebody here that can handle you.
Yeah.
Let's see what I have here.
We did that modification, and it really worked out well for our small related accessory structures. But, I wanna make sure that we
Is it not in there?
say, it is, don't worry, I'm good. Let's see it in this one. We've got storage-related buildings up to 200 square feet. So, I'd rather it say 200 square feet or less than 200. Because if you look at this on parent 3, it says related accessory structures over 200 square feet. I mean, so that one should really say storage related accessory use structures, sound like crazy over by,
Well, so
Equivalent
200
power.
square feet
Power,
fits in
it says right
paragraph 2.
Pardon me?
Paragraph 2 includes 200 square feet. Paragraph 3 addresses everything over 200 square feet.
Up to 200 square feet.
It doesn't say it includes 200, it says
Up
up
to.
to.
Yeah, somebody could interpret that as up to 199.
Yeah,
If you have a 200 footer, you're SOL.
It's just something a little bit, yeah, good, include.
Up
to
to
and
and including,
Yeah,
Well, it's been said, 200 or less.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
Either way, yeah.
200 square feet or less. Got it.
Okay. Then 40, a building height greater, this is where we talked about, and I had it marked down, building height greater than, at 15 is supposed to be 18, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, and one other note, when we have in certain parts of this section, this is what we had a problem with originally,
Okay.
where if you go in our, even if you go in our R1, R2, R3, it still says accessory buildings and average building height. You have to just say building height of 18 feet. So that's gotta.
Strike the average piece.
So we'll be, I can get that, okay, and then so in page 48,
Yeah, it says accessory structure 15 feet maximum average.
right now.
No, there's no one, yeah.
So under swimming pools, we clearly defined what we have, now we do really say the swimming pools, we say what's included in the definition of our swimming pools, which is great. What the heck is it? It also says, on page 49, it says, all overhead and below ground electrical wiring shall be at least 10 feet from the inside wall of any swimming pool. Well, that's, you can't be more restrictive than the NEC code and the state code. So the NEC code says 10 feet, overhead is 10 feet. Jason, you remember?
10 feet and
10 feet overhead, 5 feet,
5
5
feet
feet
underground.
underground. And I'm just saying it because you just got a letter from the state on another community where they went through some of our ordinances and they said we can't be more restrictive than.
So what should we do there? Should we
You just say all
cite those
overhead,
specifics?
John, overhead electrical wiring shall be at least 10 feet from the inside of any swimming pool, and all underground electrical wiring shall be at least 5 feet from.
Yeah.
Do we state that enough, or do we tell it to refer to whatever the standard is? What happens if they change the standard in
Right.
ours?
That's been that way for years, the 5 to 10. So I would, instead of kicking into the NEC, I would just
Put it in
either
there.
5 to 10.
Okay.
No.
While we're right there on that page, up on, number 5, the last sentence there, is that, are we missing like a footage or something there?
No, we're missing a reference. I thought I caught all those. I need to refer to a section prior, and some of these things got renumbered,
Okay.
so I left those blank until the final draft happens. Then I'll-
Oh, it's under
Referring to-
referencing something
Right.
above. Okay. I gotcha.
I should be able to fill that one in.
Yeah, I've read that like 3 or 4 times, and we're talking minimum heights and stuff, and I get it now that above actually references one of the codes above, not
Not necessarily.
like footage above, yeah. What's the problem with that be?
What if you have a pool building attached to your house, an indoor pool? The one line says the pool shall not be nearer than 10 feet to any residence.
But yeah, if it's enclosed, that's not different.
They're more worried about the line coming down and making contact with the water if you overload or something.
Then you gotta consider ventilation.
Yeah, that pool should not be any nearer than 10 foot to any residence. It's kind of a weird thing that came with Waukesha County. And sometimes you do struggle with it because there are different, and the ironic thing with Waukesha County, when they did they had 10-foot separation in their regular zoning district, but in the shoreline, there was no separation. So I've never been a fan of that, to be honest with you. But it's up to the planning commission. I asked Washington County why they did it one time, well, they said they didn't want anybody jumping off their house.
Jumping off
Yeah,
the roof.
It was to try to fix stupid.
Who would do that?
How can the police be stupid?
Hey, 10 feet, if you get enough running start, you can go like that.
I need to see what happens if you're short.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, that's a YouTube video, they're all on there.
Yeah,
You'll probably find that.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know, that seems kind of a silly line.
Yeah, in my opinion, it is too. I don't know what they're gonna do with it, but.
Which line?
The 10 feet from building.
6.
Oh,
6.
sorry.
Roman numeral 6.
You think you're gonna strike that, or what are you,
Yeah, what if you
what
have,
are you guys thinking?
half your pool outside and half inside, and you're swimming, so you can swim out?
Lazy River, you have it.
And then you kind of figure, so what if you have, what if you have a big open porch on a deck,
Right, it's
Pool
attached to
comes
the
right
house.
there and it's attached to the house, It's kind of weird, if you ask me, but.
Yeah. I prefer to get whatever you guys
You just strike the whole line.
feel makes the best sense.
It's, I hate to say it, to put it on our shoulders at the discretion of the building inspector, someone do that, but, I mean, it's just, some of the things now are different than they were when this
Right.
original was done, There's a lot more outdoor, speed torches that are connected to your house, they go right, and you come down and get a small deck for your food and stuff, So it's kind of an outdated line, if you ask me.
I don't have a problem just striking it.
I don't have any thought either direction really.
If you have one of
I was
those
just
little,
looking to see if we had a definition.
those exercising pools, that are very small and they're moving water, you don't want that out.
Those Swimex pools?
Yeah, you don't want that way out in your yard, you want that right,
Right.
near your residence too.
Right. You know,
You wanna say separation between a pool and a residence may be required at the discretion of the building inspector?
Vince was saying earlier, they want that discretion. You just-
Yeah.
That's a fight waiting to
I
happen.
heard
It always is.
Yep. Can you picture a scenario where somebody's gonna propose it
How
right
about,
up next to the house and you're gonna say this?
Yeah, because they're trying to squeeze it in for their setbacks and to make it work on a small lot, then they can put
Well,
have the pool right up against the house.
then put something in so that you can invoke a
Have
separation
a
if you
overview.
feel it's necessary.
Would assume that people's insurance would kick in at that point. Insurance may not allow you to have it that close. It'd be like tripping out the back door and falling in the pool.
Right,
My
ask
grandma
your kids a
did.
sandwich.
yeah, because of the insurance, or some of the things get, so that wouldn't be our discretion. I prefer to just, I don't really think,
Strike it.
I think it should, I think it's outdated, in my opinion.
Well,
As long as we're right there, number 9 sounds, I read it the first time, I actually had to read it again to try to figure it out. Heating units, pumps, and filter equipment shall be in no case less than 20 feet from any property line. The way that reads is that you have to actually have it within 20 feet of a property line. That's why you need to keep it away from that 20 feet.
right,
Maybe it just needs to be worded a little different.
Shall not be located closer than.
Oh, see, you are correct, yeah. Okay, I clarified. Anytime you can clarify, it gives,
bedtime.
it doesn't give anybody the ability to.
Come on, really? Yeah.
20 feet.
He's just hanging out, he loves the zoning code, so he doesn't need to be here. He loves it.
saving for he can't sleep.
This is what puts him to sleep.
This is his melatonin for the night, yeah.
Kids
All
are
those
going for a ride after this,
Yeah.
just gets them geeked up.
Yeah.
All right, the next one for me is page 50, under fencing. And this is just clarity, and if you remember, we did clarify this, but it's not clarified here, so the old code, it used to read this, it used to say, may be permitted on the property line. That's problematic. You don't straddle property line with a fence, because it creates nothing but problems. So we changed this, a while ago,
Up to
where
the
it
property
says,
line?
may be permitted up to the property line, resident just, but not in the case 6 feet. So it parallels, so instead of on, it's up to the property line.
Okay.
Would you be surprised how many real estate transactions are null and void because there's fences or stuff on the property lines once you do it?
Yeah, and you did.
I recall we did that. I remember.
We did,
we
yeah, we cleaned that up a while ago.
Why it's not in my version?
Yeah, it's in this one.
Yeah,
It's in
that's
that
strange.
All right, property line, okay, so then, and then, again, on 50, and maybe I'm reading this wrong. Residential fence on the street yard shall not exceed a height of 4 feet, which is consistent, and shall be 50% or less. Opaque area.
Mm-hmm.
Am I,
Yeah, in the street yard, they need to be
so it wouldn't
see-through.
be 50% or more, not 50% or less
Well,
opaque?
no, it's, 50% or
Yes.
open.
Or less.
If the word was opaque, it would be 50% or less.
Yeah, it says, yeah, that is not more than 50%.
Yeah, that's
okay.
contradictory.
50% or more open.
That would make sense.
Yeah, 50%.
I.e.
Was I reading it right?
I.e. not more
Seems
than
like it was-
50% opaque, yes.
All right, it seemed like we were gonna grant them, you can't have more than 50%, but you don't have to. That's-
Yep, good catch.
I wanna see someone build that.
All right,
Well, in other words, it's 50%. Open.
that's how we always interpreted it before, you know, so you have a picket fence typically, or a dog-eared fence, but if you have 5, you know.
Every other one.
Yep, correct.
5 inches, 5 inches.
Well, while we're on 50, did we just strike out completely 16.15, the special use systems?
Yes.
The whole
Yep.
thing went away?
Mhm.
Really? Why, we didn't want to address things like wind farms and stuff that,
All of that stuff is, it's either controlled under our maximum height requirements, our structure definitions, and our offset requirements, or it's regulated by the state
It's out of your hands.
statutory.
okay,
Yeah,
alright.
We can't deny solar energy systems, we can't deny wind
Exactly.
energy systems, we can't deny any of those things.
Towers.
They tell you what you're gonna do.
Okay, so that's all basically covered under state code then?
Yeah.
Okay, alright,
Or other spots we
Or
cover.
even federal.
yeah, okay.
All right, so, and I'm just throwing this out to you, you know, and it's been in here for a while. But, and I've never had someone call me on it, but under, in page 61, under storage prohibited, no mobile home in excess of 25 feet in length shall be able to be stored on any property except in approved home park. Is 25 what we're looking for? Because I'm just
Pretty short.
I'm just asking, because that's pretty small.
RVs are 30.
But we
We
had
probably
that.
have, I don't know, a lot of them probably are, I never go on count them,
So I actually looked back at the definitions of everything, and there is a different definition between mobile home and recreational vehicle, if that's where you're headed with that. And this is specific to mobile home.
but.
So it's saying you can't put a mobile home park it
in excess of 20 feet.
on any property in excess of 25 feet unless it's in an approved home park.
Okay, so we're not, so
It's-
we're.
It's not saying
so-
any, it's not saying anything about recreational RVs.
Yeah, I didn't look at it that way, but yeah, I think you're right, we're gonna do it that way as part of the.
Because there are two different definitions.
So
Yeah,
it goes back to the definition, RV, you can drive away.
Yeah, because you're,
It's gonna sit, and it's gotta be on piers.
going under habitation prohibited on that, but then you're just going for your mobile home.
so the habitation prohibited actually does address the house, trailer, mobile
Right,
home,
right,
and recreational
right,
vehicle.
yeah,
But it doesn't say for how long it's blank. there.
That's a question that
It's
I
still
needed the
open.
commission to fill in yet. So if you are gonna allow for house trailers, mobile homes, RVs, to be habitated for some period of time each year, what is that? What is that magical number? We've had requests like this. We've had
Yes, we did.
people ask if someone's hoping to stay for the summer,
On our TV, that
and in turn upset the neighbor because, because now we've got an extra neighbor
Maybe a long
living in the
time.
driveway.
And you're wondering until they park there for 2
Camper.
weeks every summer, you know,
You're right. Yeah.
I would think 30 days or 2 weeks, somewhere in that range. A vacation.
Goes on to say unless specifically approved in advance by the planning commission for a specific and limited period of time during construction of a new single-family residence. Planning commission may base its decision about such temporary habitation on availability of utilities, impact on surrounding neighbors and so on. So that's kind of a construction occupancy.
Hmm?
30 days.
RVs are 30 foot or more.
Well, like 30 days,
I think it's fair.
basically, easy.
Is it important?
Well, it says 30 days per year, so
Is it cumulative or consecutive or
I guess
fair?
consecutive.
You can debate that forever, we have, you know.
Well, it says per year, so 30 days per calendar year.
Right, but if you come 2 weeks in June and then you leave and you go 3 weeks, come back 3 weeks or 2 weeks in, you know, August, another 2 weeks in October, you know, kind
No,
of.
you're in, not in compliance anymore.
Cumulative.
Right, that's what I mean, that's,
We'll just say 30 cumulative days per year,
Yeah.
so that issue is resolved. If anybody happens to be tracking the dates and the, you know,
The neighbors will be.
right,
Mhm.
right.
Absolutely, trust me. It's been showing.
Okay, and we talked about this last time on page 74, about, and I don't know if you've done any research on that, and if I remember last time we were talking about the exterior lighting and locations of lighting in parking lots, have to meet the setbacks of the district, remember they came and they were
On
talking
Bucket
about.
Street with that light, that they couldn't put a light up in front of their shop for
We were
security.
talking about that, whether,
Mhm.
industrial drive,
Yeah, they were at the corner of Industrial and Bucket, I think.
Doc's former
Yep,
building.
yep.
Right.
I mean, because now, I mean,
What is it?
because at that particular time, they could theoretically put a light, couple lights on their building and shine out towards the road, rather than have, you know, stanchion lights that actually were shielded that went towards their building, you know?
Doesn't this give us that ability though?
Well, because it still says.
Unless otherwise specifically waived or modified by the planning commission?
Doesn't it say it's gotta meet the setback requirements still?
The what?
I was looking at the height, where we have to set back.
The location light fixture shall not be permitted within the setback.
Right.
That's
Now,
what they
here.
wanted.
And that's where 50 feet came all the way into,
So can you add that to it too?
The verbiage for the planning commission to have oversight.
Lighting is not a bad place to give the planning commission.
Well, I was gonna say, have them do like a lighting plan
There's so
per,
many variables.
per business or something like that, so we make sure that we can look
Yeah,
at
it'd
it.
be much more objectionable having a light on a building shining out to the street.
Right, cause then all of a sudden you're gonna get a nuisance where
Yeah,
it's
From somebody across
shining
the
in.
street or.
But if every business would come in and have their survey or a GIS picture and say, we wanna do this, this, and this, and push the light back on their property, I think
We
that,
do require a lighting.
Yeah, lighting
plan.
is a metric
Show your
that shows that.
fixtures, your
Right.
locations,
Right, it
your
would be nice
dispersion
if
plan.
you could have, if the plan commission would have some discretion on looking at those and.
On the location, rather than having it strictly
Yes.
street back.
Can you add that line?
Yeah, just put
Unless
that.
otherwise specifically waived or modified by the planning commission, given the unique circumstances of a particular place.
Gives us the ability to modify that setback requirement.
that is.
I'd almost like to put it right under exterior lighting, paragraph 7 on page 73, and then start with A. Unless specifically waived or modified, all exterior lighting shall comply with the following.
That works.
Modified by the planning commission.
Sure, that gives you the option on all of the situations.
Yeah.
You guys like
I
that?
don't know, talk about it.
Well, hey.
You should add that clause right to the
Move it
whole,
up, so it's at the top, so it kind of applies
Item
everything
7.
well.
Under the exterior lighting standards.
yeah.
I'm almost done, can we go forward?
Wash.
118. Heck was the next one? 118. Can I add, on parent C, keeping the horses owned or for private use only by the property owners, occupant rate at not to exceed 1 horse for the first 3 acres of land, and 1 additional horse for each acre in excess of 5.
Sorry, what page is that?
118 at the top.
Yeah, so it's basically saying you can have one horse up to 5 acres,
Yeah, maybe.
right? So why even put that first
So
thing in there?
typically what it is, it's typically one horse per the first 3 acres,
Yeah,
and then 1 additional horse per
acre.
acre above it, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so I didn't know if that was a typo or.
No, I think the original thought was, is that, you know, again, there's a minimum of 3 acres to have a horse, and they didn't wanna see, from the discussion I remember, didn't wanna see another horse until there's at least a 5. You know, I don't know why that was brought that way, but that's what I recall, is that it was to set the minimum, and then say you're not having a second one until there's a couple more acres, you can't just have 4 acres and get 2 horses.
It's just.
I'm not sure why, but that's,
It's just
that was the
unusual,
intent.
it's unusual, it's not
Yeah,
typical word
yeah.
that way.
I think standardizing it to the 3 minimum, and then 1 per acre is probably fine.
So the only time, you have to have 6 acres if you have, for 2 horses.
Correct.
That's where we're.
Right, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
It is
For
a-
an
for
airport,
2
like
horses,
Big
That's a
Bend,
lot
that's
of
pretty
acres.
high.
It is very high.
Yeah, I think probably Vince, you're right. I should say
One minimum 3, and then 1
plus
per
1
acre.
additional horse.
Per
acre,
That's full
over
acre, so
3
you have to
acres.
have, well, 3 acres, so 3 full acres gives you 1 horse. 4, you know, another additional acre gives you another one, not 3.5 or anything, so, I mean, that's pretty standard throughout.
And 1 additional horse for each additional acre.
So if you have 10 acres, you can have 8 horses.
Right, and then the other thing that I was talking about, and we went through this, was that adjust that building height in our different districts from accessory structures to be 18-foot maximum height, not 15-foot maximum building height.
How we just started?
And then last but not least, I think, 193. Upon reasonable cause or question as to proper compliance to revoke any building or occupancy permit issued, cease and desist orders requiring cessation of any building, moving, raising, alteration, until real estate by the, so, you added raising in there, what does that mean?
They're tearing stuff down.
So all, it's just
Tearing it down.
basically saying that they're tearing down on a permit, is that what we're talking
That's
about?
what we're trying to protect against, yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure it wasn't
Yep.
something.
We,
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
literally
raising
just
elevation,
went
it
through
was
this.
raising as in
Right,
like.
right, raising a building.
There's a building sitting in Pewaukee right now that's disconnected from sanitary, from gas, from electric, from everything. And storm fencing's all around, and they're ready to take it down, and the raising permit got revoked. So, it was designated a historic structure in the
Yeah, I saw
interim,
that.
so they didn't knock it down fast enough.
Wow.
Now what? Fast enough.
Now
Pull the rug
it's-
out
now it's
from
gonna
underneath
stay.
you.
Now they gotta hook it all back up?
They're gonna winterize it for this year,
Yeah.
and next year's gonna get all connected.
Wow.
Alright, so that's all I have, but, I mean, I do really wanna try and go over this again, just to make sure I didn't miss anything, you know?
I appreciate your eyes especially on all of that. Who's next?
I'll go through mine. I
Turn
mean,
the
I don't-
stack back over.
I thought these tabs would work fantastic.
I think you have more tabs than I have, Chris.
You know, that's one thing wearing a mask a lot, it's hard to often lick your finger, you know, to grab paper, and you can't do that readily anymore.
That's a good thing, come on.
So, the first one I got on is on page 32. It's just clarification more than anything. Under plan submittal and review, it says scale shall not exceed 1 inch equaling 20 feet. Is that clear enough to say that it could be 1 inch equals 50 feet or 1 inch equals 10 feet? It's just kind of the semantic of the whole thing of how it's worded, if somebody's gonna try to submit into something that's smaller than what we want it to be.
So the plans shall be drawn to scale and not to exceed 1 inch or 20 feet. Yeah, that's,
I
My
know
mind.
what, I know what we're looking for, I'm just saying if somebody else reads it, are they gonna be able to understand it?
No, that makes sense. You
yeah,
can do it
people
1
who,
to 10.
the people who need to concern
can't do it
themselves
1 to
with that
50.
know what that means,
Right,
yeah.
okay, alright, I just, like I said, I just wanted to make sure everybody felt comfortable with that. Alright, so, I had this down, I'm not sure why, but page 34, number 3, water supply required. No permit should be issued unless provisions are made for a safe and adequate supply of potable water or connection is to be made to an approved municipal, I don't know, that's probably raging tired at that point. I think that's okay. I just wrote down is, question mark, if that was the correct thing to say, I guess, but I think that's right.
You can bring it back up next month.
Yeah, I think, reading it again, it looks fine. The next one I have here is on page 38. There was, under B, part I, there was just a comment out here that had a question mark on it, and I guess I was wondering what that was for. It was under the no other requirements of the zoning code need to be satisfied.
I meant to ask the village attorney that, and I didn't do it. This ordinance was written by the village's attorneys, and that seems like a massive caveat in there that I don't think is intentional.
Yeah, it seemed like it kinda just left it wide open.
Yeah. requirements of the zoning code need to be satisfied, but for those required in order to obtain. Yeah, I just can't imagine we're intending to throw out the whole rest of this book,
Yeah, especially with, yeah,
adult-oriented
Yeah, right.
establishments. I will double check that with the attorney
Of all establishments, yeah.
and put a response in that margin for the next edition. Actually, I'm gonna try and get rid of all the comments so that we don't have these giant margins on the document anymore.
Yeah, that'll change your whole pagination.
Yeah, well,
the next one I had
what
is
will all
on
happen?
page 47, under 3. It just references, approved by the PC, and it's the only place in this whole document that I saw planning commission or planning commission abbreviated. Thought maybe you just toss that in there as you were rewriting stuff.
I'm sure I did, that's my short.
Not that it's a big deal, but
Yep.
it's the
Should be
only place it
consistent.
was
Yeah, I
taken
like
down. And then right below that, again on number 3,
Asterisks?
yeah, the asterisks, they don't asterisk to any place that I can see, so. I didn't know if it was supposed to be asterisked someplace, or if that was something to remind you to do something there.
I'm gonna have to review that and figure out why I put that there. And resolve it.
Next one I got is page 59, under B. There is a duplicate line in there. Plan commission may, if the need is evident, permit more than one such vehicle. They find the increase in the number of such vehicle, they find the increase in the number, yeah, it's, it just
Okay.
kind
I
of
like it.
complicated.
Trying to get the point across.
Yeah, that's where I shut it down for the night, by the way, because I seriously thought I was reading it.
Hey, we're reading 4 times, did I just read that twice, 4 times in a row, or?
While you're on that page, right at the very top line, it says during any 24 per period. Is this per period?
Or is it hour?
Per, is it hour, yeah. Well, it's right there.
She was so tired, he didn't catch that on these, rereading that line twice.
He was speaking the way it was written.
Slur.
Answered.
I'm gonna back up to page 48 right away, I guess. There's just a typo there. Spelling typo. Under swimming pools. 4A2 says bathhouse, slides, and Sin Miller. I don't know what that is exactly. That's a pool here.
Where are they?
Page 48.
Page 48, under swimming pools. 4A2, so paragraph 2. It says slides and Sin Miller.
Got it.
So the next one I have is across a couple of different of the residential zone designations. First one's on 161. It's for the R1 residential district under conditional uses. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the next couple with conditional uses. It just says accessory dwelling units dash family only. Everything else is struck out. Struck it. You took it out of there, and I didn't know if there was supposed to be more added in, or if I'm missing what that would actually be referencing on a conditional use. Because the next one, R2 residential district for conditional uses is exactly the same thing. It says accessory dwelling units dash family only.
back.
Yeah, cause R3, same thing.
Mhm.
And then it changes for R, R4 is still the same thing in conditional uses, and then it changes for, RP and RM. It actually has different conditional uses. Spelled out a little bit more. It's actually talking about, home occupations and professional offices,
Yeah, we were allowing those as permitted uses in other districts, that was part of that.
but not for the typical residential districts.
Yeah, it was a
That's
permitted
a
use.
permitted,
Rather than
in the
conditional
permitted
use.
instead of CU, yeah.
Okay.
It makes more sense, obviously, in those other districts and not necessarily in the other ones, and that's why it was separated.
Okay, so it was a permitted accessory instead of conditional, okay.
And where you get into multifamily, it was gonna be a conditional use because you got the different
Other
effect there.
impacts,
That makes
yeah.
sense, yep. So I guess it just goes back to was there supposed to be additional or not under conditional uses?
I think I may have dropped the ball on that. I recall, it's quite a while back when we took those out. But I thought that I was going to double back, maybe at a subsequent meeting, and talk about those individual conditional uses.
Yeah, I think we did talk about just taking them out for the time being and then we'll come back and review that.
Sort of cherry pick which ones,
Yeah.
because of the Act 67, basically making
Right.
conditional uses a permitted use with an asterisk behind it. Do you wanna do that tonight, or would you guys like to look through those crossed out lists under R1, 2, 3, and 4? And think about which ones you feel you could safely put in there, understanding that those are uses that you really will be required to permit. Even though they're listed as conditional uses, you're compelled to permit them unless you can demonstrate that there are adverse impacts that are tangible, real, measurable, not just disgruntled neighbors, not just speculation that the traffic's gonna go up. It's all gotta be real, it's all gotta be measurable.
There'd be big drugs there, could be a drug house.
Right.
I don't think we put that in the conditional use.
I meant like a CBRF as an example. You know, they got, that was one thing we took out. CBRF means a lot of different type of CBRFs, it could be.
Yeah, but you can't do anything with CBRF, it's a permitted use no matter what.
You don't need to put them in there
Under the
for
state
that
statute,
reason.
correct, right.
Yeah,
You can't do anything.
Just leave them out, yeah. Or you leave them all out and you decide going forward on a case-by-case basis, whatever comes to you.
You review it at the time.
You review it at the time and decide whether you're gonna add it as a conditional use in a particular district or not.
I wonder if I believe that's maybe what we did.
I
That's why.
remember we had
I'd have
that
to go dig up my
conversation.
notes for that, because that one was probably pushing 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That was really early in the stage. But now that you said that, that kind of rings a bell, and that we wanted that ultimate oversight on each one.
So before we try to pontificate that again tonight, why don't you guys go back and see what you
Yep.
can see? So, takes care of.
IPS, what does that mean? IPS, what does that be abbreviation for, anything?
Institutional and public service.
For sure.
I just have that note where, under R1, when I got all the conditional uses crossed out, I have RPS written there.
Oh, that's probably why we took it out of conditional uses here, because we have a district that provides for that particular use. For the churches, synagogues, religious assembly buildings.
So, I only got a couple left, page 195, talking about the Village Plan Commission. Under A, reads like we actually have 14 members. Basically, you're saying there's 7 members, but then it kind of goes in and explains where the members come from, but it's just kind of badly worded. Or maybe it needs to have like a semicolon or colon or something there, I'm not sure. It's just, the way I read it, it listed it out as 7 members, the village president, a village board member, and 5 citizens, so it actually
Could just
almost
be
makes it sound
terminology
like
of 7
14.
members made up of.
Yeah, something like that, just clerical more than anything.
Got it, I'll clean that up.
And then the last thing I had was on page 204, it's talking about schedule of deposits, forfeitures. It's got the table here, but I guess I wasn't really understanding how that was put together. I didn't know if that was just preliminary or if it's, it just seems like every offense that you would have, it's first time's 100, second time's 300, 900 for a third offense, and 1 to 10,000 after that. For everything. I don't know why we have a big, huge, long table list of it if it's just,
All the same.
Well, all the same.
Break the law, it's $100.
Okay, well,
$100.
unless the table to provide the detail of the various ways.
yeah. And then also, down at the bottom especially, that's where I was going with it, says review this list for completeness at end of redraft session.
Right,
So I figured that was kind of being left open.
yeah. It doesn't include, for instance, the RP district, the residential flex district. So that is what that note in my stuff is
Gotcha.
for.
Make sure all of them are represented.
Right. I
It's
don't
nice that they
disagree,
do
it
that.
might just be easier to say,
List out all the infractions and then say the tiered, or the tiered
And it's
amounts
nice that
are
you're,
X.
it's nice that you're giving them 3 tries to break the airport safety zone, but we also struck out everything that we had about the airport's safety zone, I believe.
Oh,
If I
okay.
saw that right, so.
Yeah.
That's if you want to try and build an airport.
Fine, cover of darkness, Warren.
Just keep landing your plane there and it's pretty, it becomes a runway, right?
On a pond over by Kelly.
Yeah.
Waterplane,
I wonder if we'd have enough room to take one off Lake Park. Be pretty close.
I'm guessing it'd be really close.
That'd be a good bush pilot.
And then that would make me really glad that I'm on an east or west side, not on north or south, I'm just saying.
because then it's all uphill.
Nobody's
too. Once you get
doing
on
it side to
the
side,
water.
they're gonna do the length,
Yeah.
so.
That's it for me. That's all I got.
Does anybody else want to go, or should we move along with what we got for now?
We're good for the first session, we know we're gonna touch it again next month. Gives people more time to digest and review.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you want me to make the changes we discussed tonight and everybody seemed to be in consensus agreement with, and have this printed back out again with now instead of blue line, it'll be red line over the blue line, so that we can keep a kind of a running log of what we've been doing here? And for the
I'll
benefit
take
of
mine
Tom.
electronic. I saved the paper.
Yeah, you don't have to print mine out.
Yeah, those who are good with electronic should
Yeah,
say
we
so
can,
now.
thanks.
Yeah, you just print the pages that
So
are.
is there value in doing that, I guess is my question, knowing that there's gonna be more, reviewed and likely feedback and discussion to change again? Nobody chances of, hopefully, I guess the hope would be that people will do any additional review between now and then, and it's not 2 days before the meeting when we get the packet with the potential revision, you know,
Right.
that's why
Yeah.
I'm just questioning the value, of you going through and doing it this time and then likely another time,
Mhm.
as opposed to just storing the notes and saying, doing it all in one fell swoop.
Mhm. The only person I'm thinking about is Tom.
Sure.
Did you keep
I
notes
kept
of all of
really good
this?
notes too.
I kept my notes in line. If you wanted to share a copy of those notes to Tom,
I could do that, I could draft them up in an email and take them over to him. Just for his overall review, so that we don't have to put you through a line.
otherwise,
doing this,
you know,
you
let's
know,
get run through
Oh,
the
yeah, I'll bet I know.
scanner and send it to him with all my changes
Yeah,
in
yeah,
line.
He's got it, he's a laptop guy, he's got it here tonight, so.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I'm for it, yeah, I mean, if
Let's
you
do
wanna
that.
do
I don't have that problem.
My changes in line are all.
See that.
that will apply better than me calling out page numbers, cause
Yep.
it's right there.
No, that's good.
Scan away. And you don't, I don't even know if you have to do the whole thing. How far did you go?
I'll go as far as the last two,
Cool.
the deepest change. I won't do the sun code.
Cool. Make a motion? Make a motion to, adjourn?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Hold up, Lori. Bill wants to stay late.
What are we gonna do with this?
One moment, I gotta, I'll do this recording.
All right, guys, have a great night. Good luck with it.
Thank you for your time, Ben.
Thank you, guys. Good seeing you, bud.
See you guys.
Sorry to keep you here so long.
That's all right.
Good. Thanks, guys.
Bill, I got instructions from Natalie.
Uh-oh,
She made a little note, sent her baby,
okay.
so I'm supposed to let you know that the baby's not feeling well, that you can
Fix it up.
do your magic and the baby will be all good tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't know if you were trying to